open, looking at the nice trees outside my New York window and reading my iPad. And I just completely forgot you all. I'm so sorry. I mean, no excuse. I wasn't sick and there was no drama. I forgot. So now we have a plan that I get. I've even got my assistant now. She sends me these phony phone calls. You know, she's got it all mapped up. So I get phone calls. So it has to interrupt me. So then this is what happened too with Chiaki. So this is the best way. I mean, typically if we think about it, when you have a teacher come, you go and pick them up, you know, so that you can't forget. But when it's Zoom, kind of you know, old ladies, they forget. So this is anyway, we're here now and we'll make up for it and I'll have to talk even faster, okay? To make up for our lost time. So, okay, so let's just, we'll keep it simple and do a simple little prayer. The Lamas, as we know, the Lamas all say to us that we need to set our motivation. But I think in our language, we would literally say, state our purpose, you know, what is our goal? That's exactly what motivation means. So we're sitting here, so we think, well, why are we all sitting here? Because we're going to listen to Buddha's teachings, right? And why are we doing that? Well, so we can develop the two wings of the bird. We can develop wisdom, which is the first stages of practice, the teachings and practices we share with the Hinayana path. And then the second part, which is the teachings of the Bodhisattva's path specifically, so we can be a benefit to others. So we're going to achieve the two wings of the bird. So everything we're going to listen to, you know, it's advice. So we try to listen to it as advice, coming from the Buddha through the minds of our holy lamas. We've got different sets of lamas, but we share many similar lamas. So it's the advice we'll receive from all of our lamas, unless I'm lying to you, which is very naughty. I'll try not to. So we just really listen carefully and we contemplate the words as we hear them so that we can develop our own amazing potential so we can be a benefit to others, okay? And we just sing a little refuge prayer and quoting that and you know, pointing out that bodhicitta. Sangye chadang soke chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyap suchi. Dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shok. Sangye chadang soke chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyap suchi. Dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shok. Sangye chadang soke chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyap suchi. Dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shok. Well, you know, it's a very interesting point about, you know, the workshops in the mind. Lama Zopa says that. But what's interesting, I think, in the world, even among people who call themselves Buddhist, you know, we tend to think of Buddhism in a very superficial way. So a little bit like we say we're a Buddhist. That's a bit like, sometimes it's a bit, not being rude, we can be a 1% Buddhist, but it's a bit like because you can count 1 + 1 is 2, you say you're a mathematician. Well, it's sort of theoretically okay, but not quite right. And I think in general, you know, among most people, many people who call themselves Buddhist, there's not really much of an understanding of the mind. I mean, this sounds surprising if you think about it, because Buddha's expertise is the mind. But sometimes we get so caught up with all the religious side and the rituals and things that we forget that, you know. So I remember recently talking to some woman, psychologist, who's a serious Buddhist as well. And she said very seriously something like, well, Buddhism doesn't have a presentation of the mental problems. And I was so speechless. I didn't know what to say. You know, because it's just, I was absolutely horrified. Because the fact of the matter is, let's remind ourselves what this information from Buddha is, you know. Well, I mean, His Holiness Dalai Lama always says, it was something like this, you know, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. So we Buddhists, we're all very happy about Lord Buddha, but we forget the source, you know, these genius, incredible, sophisticated thinkers and scholars and yogis and philosophers, you know, these Indians, unbelievably sophisticated. We must never forget that, you know. They were the ones who did begin the investigation into the nature of self. So, okay, in our culture, in a really gross way, we think it was probably Freud 100 years ago. I mean, how arrogant can you get? But even if we think before that, we think it was the Greeks. Well, the Greeks came a good 500, 700 years after the Indians, you know, they were the ones. But I mean, that knowledge is so hidden in our culture. Even us Buddhists, we love to study Lord Buddha, but, you know, even just recently I saw the Karmapa giving teachings about these Indians, you know, and it's only really since the last maybe 40, 50 years since His Holiness has been in the West, Dalai Lama, and all these his talks with all the great scholars and scientists and thinkers of the West, and all of this, the literature now being translated, you know, into English, that now we're beginning to see the source of this incredible knowledge that we are practicing every day. We completely forget it though. So when we understand very simply the key technique, the central technique these Indians invented is what's called single-pointed concentration, you know, this unbelievably sophisticated skill, this psychological skill that enables a person to go completely beyond the grosser levels of conceptuality and the sensory consciousness to these much more subtle levels that we in the West and neuroscience do not even posit as existing. And even with the greatest respect, with discussions with Christians and Muslims and all these different discussions, you see there's no real knowledge about that either. And that's not being rude, you know. We all mystify it and call it the spirit or the soul. Well, there's incredible knowledge about the mind. And the other thing that's really mind-blowing, these Indians, you know, and Buddha studied with them. They found methods to completely stop the grossest level of suffering, the lower realms. They were the ones who found methods to stop the subtler level of suffering, the suffering of the desire realm. Okay, they didn't go far enough. They got to the formless realm, but Lord Buddha said they hadn't gone far enough. They hadn't, you know, they hadn't removed from the mind the subtlest, the most subtle mistake of ego grasping, of Marikpa, you know, so he diverged in his own direction. But all the previous stuff was already observed by these genius Indians. But the key to all of it and their ability is this skill, this incredibly sophisticated psychological skill. I mean, when you think about what it is, it's absolutely remarkable. But the thing that really also is amazing, they use that to map the mind, not the brain, but to map the mind internally. I mean, this is such phenomenal concept if you think about it. They didn't come up with looking at the brain. They didn't just look at behavior, which is the Western model. They looked at the actual internal, their own mind itself at a more subtle level and utilized that brilliant wisdom to literally map the mind. I mean, this is just mind-boggling, you know. And so then we have to realize, how do they map the mind? Well, in two ways. One, they've got this, the Buddhist view. I mean, Buddha took all this information with him. He didn't chuck it out. It's now Buddha's essential knowledge, you know. Which as we know, if we study Lorig, I mean, one of the texts that they study in all the traditions in Tibet, which comes from the Hinayana view. It's one, I think it's coming from the Sautrantika view, you know, among the tenets, this text on the mind. So you've got the epistemological model of the mind, which even that alone is so sophisticated. The actual way the mind works, it's phenomenally sophisticated, and it's coming from internal observation. We have nothing like that in the West. I mean, I'm sorry, this knowledge is so phenomenal, you know. And then there's the psychological model, which of course is the content, which is where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa says. And this is our job as Buddhists. Yes, so why do you think we sit there and be holy? Why do we prostrate? Why do we do our nundros? Why do we do our mantras? Why do I wear these ridiculous robes? Why do we live in vows? Why do we do mandala offerings? All of these are techniques that prepare our mind to do the actual job, and it's so simple, of two things: removing the delusions and perfecting the goodness. That's it. That's the job of being a Buddhist. And that's completely encapsulated in the word. The etymology of the word sangye, you know, the equivalent of Buddha. The etymology is the first syllable implies the total eradication from one's own subjective cognitive process itself, the mind, the consciousness, of every atom of all neuroses, all delusions, all misconceptions. That's it. That's the first one, which is, again, psychologically insane if you compare with the regular Western views, the modern views. You go to a neuroscientist and say, please give me methods to get rid of all ego, all fears, all sense of separateness from other beings, all delusions, all attachment, all anger, all pride, and they'll think you're mentally ill. You in the West, there's no such view, you know. I mean, it's incredible. But not only can we do that, if we're on the Mahayana path, we can perfect the rest of the mind, which is our virtues. I mean, if that's the end result, then right there, it tells you immediately the methodology. So I don't care how many prostrations you do. If you think you're being a Buddhist, you're not. Being a Buddhist, you start being a Buddhist when you actually start to work on your mind, when you start to identify attachment, identify anger, identify jealousy, identify love internally. I see it's a virtue, see it's a non-virtue, and find the methods to lessen the rubbish and grow the goodness. That's when you're a Buddhist. Everything else we do is to help us do that. Everything else we do is to prime our mind. That's what Nundro is all about. Nundro, preliminary practices. Preliminary to what, you know? It's a bit like you want to play tennis and you go to Roger Federer or whoever's existing these days, you know, it's now they're all retired, but you go to Roger Federer, can you please show me how to play tennis? And he'll look at you and know immediately you know nothing about tennis, and you're 20 kilos overweight, you can't even run, you can't walk. So he'll answer your question by saying, I want you to go off for 2 years, Robina, I want you to do this practice and go to university and study tennis theory and go on a diet and go jogging, and you'll say, no, you didn't hear me, Roger, please show me how to play tennis. And he will repeat his answer. And you know what he did? He gave you your nundros. That's what nundros are for. Don't get too caught up in being damned old nundros. I mean, excuse me, being rude. You know, have devotion to the Buddhas, yes. But the point of all the devotion, the point of the prostrations, the point of sitting here cross-legged and looking at all the holy dharmas and the pictures and our malas and our vows is so we can lessen delusions and grow virtue and become a Buddha. Are we communicating? Remember this. We have to remember this. We have to remember this. I mean, we have to remember this. This is what being a Buddhist is. But we forget it all, you know. We just forget it. We kind of, I'm a Buddhist, I prostrate. I'm a Buddhist, I sit cross-legged. God almighty. I don't care if you sit on your head. Work on your mind, you're a Buddhist, okay? And so if you're going to work on your mind, you've got to have you've got to have the model of the mind the Buddha taught. And where did he get it from? He got it from his own observation, but he learned it from his genius Hindu gurus, you know. They're the ones who discovered it. They're the ones who came up with it. The geniuses, the ones, as His Holiness says, who began the investigation into the nature of self. Unbelievable knowledge, unbelievably sophisticated, you know, because we don't read the words like this from our lamas because it's just they've got a different way of talking, you know, but we have to, somehow it's necessary for us to say it in our own down-to-earth way so we hear it freshly, you know. So the essential thing about the mind, the contents of our mind, the psychological model, there are only 3 categories into which all the thousands upon thousands of crazy and virtuous thoughts fit. There's only 3. It's almost like deceptively, unbelievably too simple. You've got the neuroses, the misconceptions, the voices of ego, you know. You've got the virtues, and the first lot are ridiculous. That's why we can get rid of them. That's why we have to get rid of them, because that's what Buddha's found. You get to get rid of the rubbish. Because why? Because it causes suffering. The second lot, we've got to grow them. Why? Because they cause happiness. And the third lot, I call them the mechanics of the mind. These are the things that enable us to do the job. But this is the thing about Buddhist psychology. It's crucial we understand this. You know, the typical terms, as we know in when you study the mind, we talk about the negative states of mind or the non-virtues, and then we have the positive states of mind and the virtues. So in psychological terms in the West, we don't like talking this way. It sounds very judgmental. We don't even discuss ethics in modern psychology, pretty much. And we never will talk about negative, positive. You know, we hear things very differently. But we've got to hear the meaning of these things. So the negative states of mind in their nature are the source of our suffering. I mean, this is the Four Noble Truths, the very first teaching that Lord Buddha gave, you know. 1, there is suffering. 2, there are causes. 3, you can get rid of the suffering and its causes. And 4, the methodology. And in the causes of suffering, there are 2 main causes of suffering. He's telling us 1 is the past actions that you did that sowed seeds in your mind, and 2, the delusions that drove those actions. That's it. 2 main causes. It's almost so simple we can't hear it, you know, because we make it so complicated. I mean, the West, we make it so complicated, you know, why I'm suffering. Buddha's view is so direct, you know. You look into your mind. It's incredible. So the mind has the negative, neurotic, deluded states of mind. I call them the voices of ego. The positive states of mind, which are our saving grace, our virtues. And the third lot are the mechanics. They call them usually negative, positive, and neutral. Well, that's kind of weird. Neutral sounds like they're not important. But it means they're neither, the third lot, they're neither negative nor are they positive. Insofar, but they're necessary states of mind. So there are many of these, as we know. One is called intention, not in the way we think about good intention. That's motivation. Intention is almost the meaning of karma, mental action, mental, like a decision, I will, volition. That's bare bones intention. That's neither negative nor positive. It is not a virtue and it's not a non-virtue, but it's a completely vital state of mind. Without intention, nothing will happen. It's the first step. It's the first step in everything we think and do and say. So whether you're intending to murder your mother or give $1 to a poor person, intention is starting first. It's neither negative nor positive. It's the motivation that drives it that makes it negative or positive when you do the action. Then you've got concentration, that in its nature is not a virtue. Mindfulness, which is the biggest, fattest word in the bloody planet. We all think it's a holy, holy thing. No, Lama Zopa says thieves need mindfulness. It is one of those neither virtuous nor non-virtuous states of mind. It's one of the mechanics of the mind that's basically the ability to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. But we go on about it like some holy thing, you know. Oh, be mindful. We make it such a song and dance about it. It's a crucial state of mind. But whether you want to murder somebody or, you know, or meditate, you need good mindfulness. You've got to train it. These are all the mechanics of the mind, the crucial parts of our mind that play a major role in enabling us to do anything at all, good or bad. When we understand these three categories, suddenly the Buddhist view of the mind comes into focus. We know what the hell we're talking about. So now we know what to begin to observe in our own mind. We know what to label, you know. But this is already tremendously difficult because in our problem is because of samsara, because of karma from countless past lifetimes, because of delusions, because of attachment and aversion. As soon as something unhappy, as soon as you know, our attachment is triggered, as soon as our anger is triggered, the first thing we do is we point to the thing. When we feel attachment, we point to the cake. When we feel anger, we point to the mean person. And so, and that's certainly in our culture, psychologically, we go into detail about the thing that happened, the external event, the past thing. This happened, this happened. We try to dig up the past in order to understand our mind. Buddha doesn't ask us to do that. Buddha doesn't ask us to see what our mother did to us and our father or the mean person. Buddha says, look at your mind, baby. And don't have to go back into the past. You look into your mind now and you dig deeper and unpack and unravel and go deeper and deeper and deeper until eventually you can rid your mind utterly of all the rubbish, you know. Yes, based on shamatha, of course. And it's an incredibly sophisticated model, but this is not how we think about it in the world, including us Buddhists. But this is exactly every word I'm saying is Buddhism. Are we communicating? The workshop is in the mind, and to begin to know your mind, like Lama Yeshe says, be your own therapist. He's not kidding, you know. But it's a tremendously hard job because we don't want to look at our mind and we can be forgiven for that because we've got the five senses. And even this is a tremendously powerful point to begin to understand. Let's even look, this is the epistemological model of the mind, the first one. Let's look at this. Look at the distinction between the sensory and the mental. This is a tremendously powerful point, I tell you. If we can begin to understand this, already we can begin to see how we make a mess of our lives, you know, and how we live in la-la land. So we've got the five sensory consciousnesses. The word in general, consciousness and mind, they're synonymous, okay? So we talk about the sensory consciousness, and there's not just one big lump. There's eye consciousness, ear consciousness, tongue consciousness. There's five. We know this. But listen to this. This is so powerful. And if we can really remember this, we can really begin to see our minds. So, you know, I'll use a simple little example. Let's say I take my thermos. Oh, look at it. It looks like an illusory thermos. Look, it disappears. Isn't it? Look at that. It's like an empty. So here we go, my thermos. Now, I chose this online because I like the design, okay? I won't just buy any rubbish. I buy what I like. If I'm going to spend my money, I'll buy what I like. So I look at this thermos, and I decided I like this one, so I bought it. So I would say to you, if you see my eyes, look here, and I will say there's a very nicely designed thermos. I would say that, okay? So naturally, we assume that my eyes, we wouldn't even say my eye conscious, my eyes see a well-designed thermos. Well, Buddha says, don't be ridiculous. It's not a possibility. First, your eyeball does not see anything because eye consciousness, which is necessarily not physical, and even though all we're good Buddhists, we completely forget about that. All we go on is about the brain all the time. Nothing wrong with being the brain. You got to remember Buddha's view. He's not discussing the brain. That's not his expertise, you know. I would say, without insulting all the neuroscientists, that the brain is the physical indicator of what is happening in your mind, right? So anyway, the eye, it's not even the eyeball that sees something, it's your eye consciousness. But the point is here, when you study my echo, I've got a big echo. Have you got an echo there? No. Well, I've just listened to my own voice shouting back at me. What a bore. What can I do? Okay. Nothing we can do. Okay. So anyway, so the eye consciousness, think about it, you know, is that part of your mind, which is not physical, that functions through the medium of the eyeball and all the bits and pieces working nicely, right? So these two together, properly functioning, will then cause a cognition. So, okay, the mind, it is that the definition of a mind or in a state of mind or the mind in general is a definition has two parts usually. The first part tells you its conventional characteristics. So mind is that which is clear, which simply means not physical. And then the second part tells you its job, and it is to cognize or to be aware or to know. Those three verbs are synonymous, and that's the job, the function of the mind. So eye consciousness, ear consciousness, tongue consciousness, the five sensory consciousnesses, each has their own object that they cognize. They always talk in Buddhism, the mind is subject, and whatever it cognizes is its object. And we're not just talking physical things. Now, what are the objects of eye consciousness? Well, no way is a well-designed thermos the object of an eye consciousness. Eye consciousness can only cognize two things, shape and color. Ear consciousness can only cognize sound. So in other words, they're profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. When we understand that, then what happens is, so okay, so you've got to ask yourself the question then, if my eye consciousness is not directly cognizing a well-designed thermos, which part of my mind is doing that cognizing? Well, that's your mental consciousness. And as Lama Zopa says, that's where the workshop is. What's all the thoughts and concepts and feelings and emotions and unconscious and subconscious and instinct and subtle consciousness and whatever you want. That's the mental consciousness. And that is where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa says. But basically, what happens is this. Okay, the extra point is, it's very fascinating that the Buddhist view is that every tiny thing any being has ever seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelt, or thought about never leaves the mind. It never disappears. It goes into the mind and is stored there in our memory. So clearly we can't access our memory. I'm not talking the physical brain memory. I'm talking literally everything we've ever experienced. And if it's since beginningless time, we've got a lot of memories in there, but we can't access 99.999% of them. Why? Because our first level of consciousness, our gross level, I'm going to go into this, is not capable. But nevertheless, all my thoughts since I've been born, and not to mention past life, are stored in my mind, and I've decided what I like, what color I like, what shape I like, what music I like, what appeals to me, what doesn't appeal to me, all my attachment, all my anger, all my theories, all my viewpoints. That's all the stuff in my mental consciousness. So what happens is the millisecond my eye consciousness goes here, and cognizes that shape and color, quicker than Google, not kidding, up comes a concept that says, what a well-designed thermos. That is your mental consciousness. And you know what? From the second we wake up in the morning, our five sensory consciousnesses, which is the most dominant for us, it's all we think of, really, as we are. They so dominate our lives. As Lama Yeshe says, we make the body the boss. Our five senses immediately wake up, don't they? And immediately you start to cognize shapes, sounds, colors, whatever, you know? And then next millisecond, what happens is our mental consciousness is accessed and the thoughts start. So basically all the thoughts that are 1,000 a second, you know, going on, they're all opinions. They're all opinions, and they're all fitting into those three categories. They're either a neurotic, deluded, ridiculous, over the top misconception, which is the source of our pain. Oh, what an ugly cup. That's anger. Oh, what a divine cup. That's attachment. It's an opinion. It's a concept, but it's attachment. It's exaggerating the very essence of that thing. There is a valid concept. That is a thermos. That's a fact. We can prove that. That is black. We can prove that. So we have all these concepts. Some are deluded, ridiculous in the first category. Some are valid, reasonable, appropriate, and virtuous. And the third lot are all the mechanics that enable our mind to function. So, I mean, we have to learn to become super familiar with the workings of our own mind. Now, if we don't know Buddha's psychological model, how can we do that? You can close your eyes until the cows come home and say you're being all mindful, and, and then you say, oh, you feel anger. What we're saying is we're feeling our body shaking because we don't notice our mind until it comes to the surface of the body. So anyway, we have to learn to understand, one, the sensory, and that's already very sobering, it seems to me, if we can realize that everything out there is merely an object of the five senses. Shape, color, sound, smell, no character. And then the rest of it is opinions made up by our crazy mental consciousness, But our tragedy, of course, is we don't realize this. We just think when I say that's a well-designed cup, I believe my viewpoint is an external fact of the cup itself. When my attachment in my mind takes over and sees the delicious chocolate cake, and attachment says it's divine, attachment is seeing a thing on that plate that doesn't exist. There is a shape and color. There is a brown triangle. Chocolate cake is a correct concept. Right? It is all those, but attachment colors it. So this is where we have to learn to understand the function of all these thoughts and feelings and emotions. This is being a Buddhist. And they're either going to be deluded, ridiculous, afflictions, the source of my pain. They're going to be virtues, which are the source of my happiness, or valid concepts, valid cognitions. And then there's all the other stuff that enables me to function, So it's an incredibly powerful thing, the mind. And to learn to really become familiar with it is an astonishingly sophisticated job. And we're not discussing what your mother said or what your father said or what the husband did 27 years ago or anything else. Buddha does not ask you to do that. That's a different discussion altogether. And this is very intense. And we do not like to do this, Even if we do recognize anger in there, it's his fault, it's her fault, it's their fault. So anyway, learning to see the contents of the mind, knowing what the mind is, mental, sensory, blah, blah, blah. So if for every second of the day, we're having all these opinions about the external five objects in the senses, which is the external world, we better learn to know which ones are valid and which ones are not. And that's how the Buddha talks, So okay, the other thing about the mental consciousness, and this is just reminding us of the Buddha's view, we've got different levels of mental consciousness. We basically have conceptuality, and then we have non-conceptual of the mental consciousness. And that is known as direct non-conceptual perception. And you only get that when you've got shamatha, basically, That's advanced state of mind. And we don't even posit such a state of mind as existing in neuroscience or in psychology. So in other words, we live at the level of conceptuality. We only live at the level of conceptuality. And so why we can't remember 99.9% of today, and you've only been up about 3 hours, and you can't remember most of what you've done or thought today, because conceptuality doesn't have that capability. It's a very gross level of mental consciousness. But we've got the ability, if we get shamatha, give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll, do all your non-dros, and go to the mountains for several years, you will get shamatha. And then you will access at such a level, you'll get clairvoyance, you have a brilliant wisdom, you're able to see the past, see the future, and really then begin to be a proper Buddhist, So let's look at the way the mental consciousness functions in day to day, and how all the thoughts and feelings and emotions we have, and I mean emotions, are all conceptual states of mind. And this is the one that really, when we can begin to understand this, we can begin to be a Buddhist, I tell you. So in our world, we would say up here is concepts, isn't it? The head. Oh, my thoughts, concepts. And we think of concepts as very kind of hard and intellectual, And then we think of feelings and emotions here, and we make this absolute distinction. Well, it's a shock to hear that as far as the Buddhist analysis is concerned, all of our thoughts, like whether it's, mathematical thoughts, thoughts about music, scientific thoughts, all the clever intellectual thoughts that we can learn, theories and things, they are absolutely conceptual thoughts. Yes, they are. But all the emotions, all the afflictions, including love and compassion and kindness, all the virtuous and non-virtuous, what we would refer to as emotional states of mind, they are all rooted in being conceptual stories. We live at the level of conceptual, besides the sensory, we live at the level of conceptuality. And when we start to work on our mind, start to notice, first we have to know the theories. What is a negative positive? What is a positive state of mind? What is love? What is attachment? How do you define it? How does it function? The theories first. Then with meditation, you begin to notice it. Aha, there's the concept of attachment. There's love. There's compassion. There's kindness. There's generosity. There's anger. There's, all the different states of mind. It's a highly sophisticated job, I tell you. But they're all conceptual. They're all conceptual. They're concepts, they're viewpoints, they're opinions. So how is this so, When you are raging angry or totally despairing with jealousy, and the feeling of, we all know the feeling of it, and including in our body, is unbearable, isn't it? So we can be forgiven for thinking that jealousy is physical, that anger is physical, that attachment is physical. I mean, look at attachment. When it gets its object, let's say you're in love with the latest boyfriend and you're having the best sex on the planet. To be able to identify in your mind the attachment that's functioning, that causes your boyfriend to appear more delicious than he really is, that then triggers all these different experiences happening in your mind, to recognize that attachment is a conceptual thought, it sounds like a biggest farce of all time. Don't be ridiculous. What are you talking about? And so this is the point. We have to understand the way these conceptual states of mind work. And they are all, love is a conceptual state of mind. It's defined as a thought, the bare bones moment. It's a virtue. It's called the thought, may you be happy. Compassion is a thought, may you not suffer. So of course you grow it and it becomes incredible affection and love and compassion. That's what we're trying to do as a Buddhist, grow these virtuous thoughts. They start at the bare bones of being a thought. And then with the habit of developing them, that's when you start to grow, if we would call it, the feeling of it. In other words, that's when the body starts to feel it. Now, this is just by the way, it's not taught in low rig, but I find this extremely helpful to understand. When we understand the Vajrayana model of the physical, of the mental and the physical, it's very fascinating. When you look at the death process, the 8 stages of death that we all tend to learn, So you've got, in the Vajrayana system says we've got gross consciousness, which of course is the senses, that's the same. And then it's inextricably linked to the gross physical. There's gross body and gross mind, and they're inextricably linked. So in other words, you can't possibly have eye consciousness if you haven't got an eyeball, You've got tactile consciousness based on the body. And so as we know through the death process, these sensory states of mind gradually cease. So by the time you stop breathing, your sensory consciousnesses have ceased. Then you've got a subtle level of consciousness, which is your mental consciousness. It's much more subtle. And that mental consciousness, which is all your thoughts and feelings and emotions, all the delusions, all the virtues, all the non-conceptual ones, all the intention, all the conceptual states of mind, positive, negative, and the mechanical bits, as I call them, all of those states of mind are inextricably linked with their level of physicality, which is called the subtle body, and that's basically the 72,000 subtle channels in the subtle nervous system from head to toe. That's your subtle body, a subtle nervous system, 72,000 subtle channels from the tip of your head to the tip of your toenails, coursing through your body. And coursing through those channels is this subtle physical energy called the wind element, the air element, subtle air energy. And then inextricably linked to all those air energies is your mental states. Now, clearly this is not neuroscience. So as you go to your Tibetan doctor, and the Chinese one is similar, the Ayurvedic system is similar, the Tibetan doctor, the system is completely based on the Vajrayana. So you go to your Tibetan doctor, she'll feel your pulses, and she'll feel the imbalance of certain wind energies, which she knows are completely connected to your attachment energy, which is why you're going berserk, which is why you're having panic attacks and anxiety. So she gives you herbal medicine, which calms down the wind energy, which then calms down your attachment mind. Do you understand me? So all these are our mental states, and they are coursing through all these 72,000 subtle channels linked to their own different wind energies. So this is just subtle body. And of course, there's an intimate relationship between the subtle body and the gross body. So if you've got the habit since little girl, like I have, of anger, for example, and as we know of the three poisons, anger, I like to say it this way, is the response, when the lamas say it, when attachment doesn't get what it wants, because attachment's the fundamental, Buddha effectively in the Four Noble Truths says attachment's the main cause of all suffering. Of course, it's rooted in marikpa, ego grasping, but effectively the Four Noble Truths is a presentation of how attachment's the main cause of suffering. It's certainly the main cause of all the realms of existence. We're living in a desire realm, So attachment's primordially deep, and it's in our mind continuously running everything, this emotional hunger, this neediness to get what I want every second, and it's very fragile. And the millisecond attachment doesn't get what it wants, aversion arises, and then volatile aversion is anger. So as a little girl, my mother did not have to teach me how to be angry. I had it down. I'd practiced it in many lifetimes. I came into this lifetime with a strong habit that the millisecond my attachment was thwarted, anger would arise, and I'd be shouting and yelling and screaming. We understand this exactly. So that's why we think it's physical. So if it's a habit, anger was a habit of mine. So what happened is the attachment was coursing through my subtle energy. It doesn't get what it wants. Instantly anger arises. I don't have to say to myself, now get angry, Robina. It'll come. And so because it's and this is why it's physical, because it's a habit. And it affects the wind energies. So there's like this storm inside us, isn't there? So this is why our trouble in the West, because we don't have methods, maybe now we're learning with psychotherapy, they're teaching us, and it's all coming from the Hindus and the Indians and the Buddha, learning to be aware of what the hell we're thinking moment by moment. So our trouble is our lives. We have never paid attention to what's going on in the mind. So we don't notice we have anger until you're screaming and yelling. You don't notice, you're angry until you don't get what attachment wants. And because if the habit is strong, then it becomes physical. Of course it does, because the wind energy is becoming violent, and naturally it affects the physical body, the gross body. So look when we're feeling jealous. Look when you're depressed. Look at all these strong emotions. We believe they're physical, but they're not physical, but they're impacting upon the subtler wind energies, which impacts upon the grosser physical body. And our trouble in our culture, like I said, we don't notice attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, and anxiety until they become physical. And then, of course, it's way too late. It's way too late, I like to put it this way. It's like you've never heard of mechanics and you've got a nice new car. You've never heard of such a thing as maintenance. So you drive and you drive and you drive, and then one day at 100 kilometers an hour on the freeway, on the motorway, whatever it's called in Australia, freeway, your wheels are falling off. Oh, my wheels are falling off. What'll I do? Well, excuse me, it's a bit late. And I'm not kidding here. Our trouble in our culture, we wait till our wheels are falling off before we go to the therapist, so we sneak off guiltily to the therapist. If you go to your therapist and you say, oh, I got annoyed today with my boyfriend, she'll tell you to shut up and go home and wait till you want to kill him before you come back. So in other words, psychologically, we don't have maintenance in our culture. And I really sincerely mean this. We wait till things are volatile. We wait till our body's freaking out because we now notice that we're angry and I want to kill my husband. Or we can't get out of bed because we're inert with depression. It's just too late. And that if we use Dharma for nothing else than to merely pay attention to our damn mind so we can catch the thoughts when they're small and deal with them then you would never have a drama. You will never have a trauma. You'll never get unhappy because you're working on your mind. Are we communicating, people? It's so practical. It's so practical, I tell you. Anyway, I've said a lot of things already. What time is it? 22. Okay. Okay. Now I think it's time to have discussions and questions and things. Let's go into details now. Come on, just start talking. Ask me anything based on what I've said. Ask me. Okay, we'll just start discussing. Anything at all to start the ball rolling. And if you don't want to, that's fine. I'll say some more. Go on. Go. Anything.
In
Yep.
shamatha, if we're recognizing the thoughts and being able to put them into the categories, is it through meditation?
Darling, say a little bit more clearly because I can't hear you quite well. Can you say it more clearly, sweetheart, and a bit more loudly or clearly? I can't quite hear.
Is it through the meditation, once we've recognized the thoughts and able to put them into the three categories, whilst we're sitting in meditation, is that the time to work on them, or is it outside meditation?
Oh, good point. No, that's a very good point. It's a very good point. Okay, so this tells us, so we need to look at then the two kinds of meditation. Basically, there are thousands of techniques, and once we understand, we can make up our own every day. Buddha doesn't own copyright on this word meditation, but if we're Buddhists, we must understand what he means by meditation. So there are two main modes of meditation, only two. One is and they're both named, as we know, in terms of the end result. So the first one, invented by these genius Indians 3,000 years ago, is the end result is, as you just pointed out, shamatha, or calm abiding in English, or shine in Tibetan. So if you've that's the end result. You will have accomplished the 9 stages of developing single-pointed concentration. So now most of us, unless we go off to the mountains and work intensely for thousands of hours, for maybe years, we won't get to that 9th level. But we can start it. And most of us won't even get to the 1st level. And that's okay. It doesn't mean we can't try. So your question is perfect. So if you're doing shamatha meditation, if that's the technique you're doing on your cushion, then your business is not to involve in any thoughts. Your goal is to concentrate. If it's your breath or you're using, if you're doing Mahamudra or Dzogchen, it's the mind that you're focusing on. Your job is to focus the mind. It's like a training. And so in a sense, really from the Buddhist perspective, this is not technically even meditation. This is training your mind to be concentrated to whatever degree you can get it, so that now you can go to the second mode of meditation and develop insight, special insight. In Sanskrit, vipassana, or in Tibetan, laktong. That's when there's multitudes of methods in the second mode. Lord Buddha taught one of the very first vipassana techniques that Lord Buddha taught, or insight meditations that he taught, which is the commonest one in the world, almost like its own religion now. It's a method of utilizing your concentrated mind that you get in the first mode to then be aware of the sensations in your body. So Buddha is not trying to get us insight into our body. With this method, his goal is to help us get insight into impermanence. So, but the insight, we all know, if we're Tibetan Buddhists and we're taught, and if we're learning all the teachings in what we call Gulugpas, the Lam Rim, whatever you Sakyapas call it, I forget. But when we learn in the 6 perfections, the last 2 are concentration and special insight. Well, the special insight is referring to insight into emptiness, right? And it's utilizing a conceptual approach, and we'll discuss this in a second. But in the end, we have to get insight into everything. We need insight into impermanence. We need insight into karma. We need insight into the way the mind works. We need insight into refuge. We need insight into all the perfections of the Buddha. We need insight into everything. So the 2 modes of meditation, one is concentration. So if you're doing that, if you're on your cushion and you're focusing on your breath, let's say, and let's say you haven't got very good concentration, and most of us won't have, our main purpose there is to stay simply paying attention to the breath. So naturally, thoughts are going berserk. Of course they are, and you're going to hear them out of the corner of your eye, but it's sort of like you're on a freeway. you know very well you're single-pointedly concentrating on driving the car and all the immediate things around you, and you would never waver from that for 1 second. But you can see out of the corner of your eye all the things going on in the other lane, what's happening, but you would never start paying attention to them because you'll crash in 1 minute. So here, the concentration is a simple training. We're trying to develop a single-pointedness. Why? So that we can use it to get insight. The only reason to have concentration, the only reason to get shamatha is to be able to use it finally to get insight into emptiness. You understand me? So on the cushion isn't the time. But if you decide yourself personally that you want to sit on your cushion and you want to just look into your mind in a focused way to try and see what the hell is going on, that's your business. And of course you can look at your mind and decide what's this, and you can work out your problem. But if you're doing that, that's an example of an insight meditation. It's when you're utilizing your thoughts to go through a problem step by step very consciously. That's the insight mode, when you're using the discursive mind. Do you understand me? Are we communicating? Sweetheart, at the back. I can't see or hear her. Are we communicating?
Yes, thank you.
Huh? Okay. So it's a
Thank
question.
you. Yes, Robina. Thank you very much. Yes.
But see, what's interesting too, I remember in one of our teachers in one of our books, when he's describing 9 stages of single point of concentration, and he says one of the signs of success at the first of the 9 is we think our mind is getting more conceptual, more crazy, but it's not. It's because we're noticing. So even if we don't get concentration, I think one of the big benefits of doing a 5-minute concentration technique in the morning with determination, simply focusing on the breath going in, going out, the thoughts are all there, but our big instinct is, I wish I didn't have thoughts. Oh my God, I got too many thoughts. Don't worry about it. But inevitably you can't hear them, but you're focusing on the breath. But once you get off your cushion, then you bring to bear in your daily life the ability to stay focused. And because you're more familiar with your thoughts, you can hear them more clearly. Whereas once when you're driving the car, if you're not aware of what's going on, you only notice you're angry when the words are shouting out your mouth. But now by practicing, you're driving the car and you've developed some awareness. Initially it was on the breath, but now you've cultivated that awareness. And now you can notice your thoughts before the mouth. That's the real benefit, I would say, in the most practical way of doing a simple concentration technique every day. Are you with me? We're developing a skill to focus, but the benefit is we can't help but hear our mind, and we must not miss it. We must think, this is good. Now I can see all my shit, If you can't see your shit, how can you get rid of it? We just want it to all go away, which is stupid, It won't just go away. In our daily life, we're being our own therapist every second. We're dealing with our rubbish when it arises before it vomits out the mouth, So this is a really great bit. But the key is the 2 types of meditation. One is called concentration, and it's necessarily not discursive. And whatever object you use, if you're doing Mahamudra, it's concentration. If it's Dzogchen, if it's the breath, if it's your deity practice, in the Tibetan tradition, one of the most powerful, virtuous objects of concentration, to cultivate concentration, is the deity, And that's, you concentrate first, and then when you're analyzing the picture of it, that's the second mode, that's the insight one. So that's exactly the same used in Vajrayana as it is in the Sutrayana, the 2 modes of meditation. But we have to understand the meaning of the second one. We get confused, There are different kinds of methods to develop insight, and one of them especially is the use of conceptuality. But because you're focused from the first mode, your conceptuality can be very sophisticated and very clear. And then what happens is it triggers the insight. You know yourself, if you're just thinking through a problem, I got a bit of insight into that problem today. You were thinking it through and an insight was triggered, That's how you can use the 2 modes of meditation together. One, you focus on your mind, you focus on your breath, you get your focus, then you stop the focus, you go to the second mode. Maybe it's the teachings on dependent arising, maybe it's the teachings on karma, and then you think it through with your focused mind, and that will trigger a bit of a feeling for it, a taste. Then you stop the analysis and you stay holding that taste, and that taste will get deeper and deeper and deeper, and that's how you deepen your insight, using the two modes of meditation. But we get so confused because when we think of the word meditation, we assume it means non-conceptual. No, not at all. There's very sophisticated levels of conceptuality that we need to use to the most advanced levels, Anyway, other questions, please. Any? This 1,000 times, but let's look into these three poisons to really get a bit of a flavor, of how they function. It's so funny because Lama Rinpoche told me to teach in 1987. I was a bit shocked. I'd done a few years of study. I remember I'd done a lot of editing, so you kind of had to know that a little bit then. And I remember I was very shocked because I didn't know. I thought, oh, what am I going to say, And I'd studied the text, some of the texts. So I had some of the basic intellectual knowledge. And all these years, since then, and basically I talk about karma. I talk about the mind like I'm doing now. And I kind of feel like a bit of a fraud. I keep thinking people are going to catch me out one day and notice I'm just talking about the same thing. But that's all there is to talk about. And every time I talk about it, I get a bit clearer myself. So thank you for listening. I'm getting clearer. So thank you. So, and so we shouldn't underestimate the subtlety of these delusions. This is the point, that when we listen to the teachings, when they talk about attachment and anger, it's at a very simple level and good enough. We should understand it at a simple level. But as we keep being our own therapists, we're going to be able to unpack these neurotic states of mind to ever more subtle degrees. They go to incredibly sophisticated degrees, these conceptual states of mind. And that's our job from practice, to see this, So let's look at these three poisons. Well, as we know very well, they often talk about, Buddha talks about 84,000 neurotic states of mind, one of our teachers, Ling Rinpoche, is the reincarnation of one of the main root lamas of the Dalai Lama. He's now about 35 or 40, and he's one of our main young Gelug lamas traveling the world teaching in beautiful English. It's so wonderful to have them. I'm sure it's the same among new Sakapas to have these young lamas around. So he often says, 21,000 of the 84,000 loads of rubbish are rooted in the root delusion, marigpa, ignorance, ego grasping, whatever you want to call it. 21,000 are rooted in or have the character of attachment. 21,000 are rooted in or have the character of aversion, which is the basis of anger. And then the fourth 21,000 have a character of all three. So in other words, it's a really sophisticated map of the mind. It's incredible, and it's coherent, and it's complete, it's amazing. So all the more shocking that this therapist, who is also a Buddhist, sincerely said Buddhism hasn't got, hasn't identified the mental problems. It's just so, I'm still speechless when I hear it. Anyway, it's his main job. It's what he's done, So anyway, let's look at these three again freshly. So the root one, of course, is literally the root, such that when it's uprooted, once we've had a non-conceptual direct insight into emptiness, from that first second, we have cut the root of samsara. We've cut the root of marigpa, this primordial ignorance, the subtlest delusion of all, the subtlest affliction, the subtlest misconception, the subtlest mistake in the mind. That's the root. Now, its main voice, if you like, is attachment. That's why effectively for the Four Noble Truths, if we can start to really go deep into attachment, it's incredible. So attachment is, or, all the different synonyms for it, is like this. They're all multifaceted. We can speak about them in a simple way. We can speak about them in a more complicated way, but this is how it is. So attachment, its bare bones energy from countless lives of practicing it is dissatisfaction. And this sounds kind of simple and cute, you know, but the more we see this, that we are all primordially dissatisfied every millisecond. So this attachment energy is, its energy is dissatisfaction. So from dissatisfaction naturally comes emotional hunger, which is what attachment is. So every millisecond of the day, attachment's just there, default, you know, driving us. It's this dissatisfaction that somehow I haven't got enough, I haven't done enough, I haven't achieved enough, it isn't enough. You know, whatever you get, it's not enough. Whatever you do, it's not enough. Whatever you taste, it's not enough. Whatever you see, hear, taste, touch, smell, it's just never enough. So it's always propelling us to keep getting something more. And this is the grossest level, you know. On the sensory level, it's pretty evident. But the other way to talk about attachment is it's really a really fragile, it's like the symptom of a very fragile child. And join the universe, people. And it's kind of, it can only bear nice things. It only wants everything to be lovely. Or a more brutal way of putting it, attachment only wants what I want. It only wants what I want. That's what nice means, isn't it? So if you agree with my nice, we'll get along. But as soon as Chiaki wants something else and I want this, then we have a fight because her nice is not my nice. So attachment is this fragile part of us, every millisecond always there, always dissatisfied, always wanting something more, and always wanting what I want, and always wanting everything to be lovely. I mean, a basic way to put it is it only wants everything to be lovely. It can't cope with problems. Attachment makes us very fragile. So the millisecond attachment gets what it doesn't want. The wrong taste, the red light, the loud sound, the unhappy, the boyfriend being mean, the small pain in the toe. The millisecond we have an experience that is what attachment doesn't want, aversion instantly arises. There's no choice. There's just no choice. Everybody in the universe, if you've got attachment, honey, you have aversion. So aversion is the bare bones state of mind. Attachment is sort of gets all excited. Oh, that's lovely. And you go towards it. The millisecond the thing you know, isn't what you attachment wants, you have a panic attack. Oh my God, go away. I don't want that. That's aversion. And so, of course, there's multitudes of levels of aversion, you know. A volatile one, like I talked before, is anger. You'll explode, you know. How dare you do that to me? I didn't, blah, blah, blah. Off it goes, you know, like a maniac. So aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And attachment is there 24 hours a day. Join the universe, people. This is called samsara. It's what Buddha means by mental illness, being in samsara. You know, this is his analysis of mental illness. What do you think he means by afflictions? It's a polite word. Mental afflictions. What do you think he means? Mental illness is a perfect term for Buddha's view of what a mental affliction is. You know, it's incredible. So then otherwise we run between attachment and aversion like 1,000 times a day, easily, but we don't pay attention. We don't pay attention unless it's volatile. If you're a type of person who isn't like me, who didn't express what you felt, you'd have a small moment of aversion when the tea didn't taste nice, when your husband didn't listen to you, when something happened. But because you don't express your aversion, you don't notice it. So and nothing goes astray, so it builds up. And one day you're inert in bed and can't get out because you're so profoundly depressed. Because depression is a buildup of internalized aversion. Are we communicating? I mean, we're talking millisecond by millisecond. And because we're not conscious, we simply don't pay attention until the emotions are painful. And this is really like noticing your wheels are falling off. Whereas if you'd been to mechanics, you'd be noticing the wobbles and you'd fix the wobbling wheels. You'd never have the wheels falling off. But we don't notice. This is our tragedy, you know. And the levels of paying attention to our mind are so much more subtle, may I say it, than all of our therapies necessarily, you know. Buddha's view of it is incredibly sophisticated. And I'm not even talking about having shamatha yet. Learn to pay attention every second, you know. And they're just the two main ones. And when you study low rig, you learn about 51 mental factors. They call them mental factors. I mean, there are the 84. But even the main ones, they're so all working together. These little kind of all these brothers and sisters and cousins and in our head, all these roommates, all doing their job, all working together to have the delusions or the virtues or whatever. So it's a sophisticated model of the mind, and to learn to become aware of all of these thoughts is incredibly difficult, but is the job of being a Buddhist, And it gets more sophisticated. You get more skillful at it. So attachment and aversion, we can begin to see these 1,000 times a day. And then the crucial question is, what do you do with it, So yes, indeed, like the other person said, if you're sitting on your cushion, you don't do anything. You just stay focused. You're training. But if you're in the daytime, you see, the trouble is attachment's so subtle, so primordial. The tragedy is we don't notice attachment until it doesn't get what it wants. In other words, until anger arises, we don't even know we've got attachment. This is the very fascinating thing. In other words, there you are looking forward to cake. Of course, you sort of vaguely know you're attached, but we don't really pay attention. And you're all excited. And then, the grosser level of attachment gets all excited. And then you're excited, anticipating the cake. And if the cake comes, you just think, oh, I enjoyed the cake. But as soon as the carrot cake comes, it's only then you have a panic attack. Hey, I ordered chocolate cake. It's only then that you notice you have attachment, because anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. That's why if we're really trying to practice, when attachment doesn't get what it wants, that's the real moment of practice. That's when we start to practice. That's when we have to grab it, when the moment aversion arises, irritation, and all these polite words, irritation, upset, annoyed, frustrated, they're all mild anger. They're the response when your attachment is thwarted. So if we can just look at these two, I swear we're becoming profound Buddhists, I promise. So then the question is, of course, when you realize they're all conceptual stories, but they're so programmed we don't notice, that as you become more familiar, you've been on your cushion, or the same example, you're on your cushion, you've done your 5-minute meditation or whatever you've done, you go into the kitchen and there's hubby slurping his coffee. Just slurping his coffee, okay? What? It's not as if he's trying to kill you. He's just slurping his coffee, and you have aversion to that sound. We all know this. We had such aversion to so many things, but we would never think of it as anger. But it's mild anger, and it's the response to your attachment not getting a nice sound. So it's a moment. It's a moment. Now, if you're controlled and don't vomit out your mouth, which is good, you'll have a moment, and you'll call it irritation. But if you're not working on your mind, you'll suppress it. And you won't deal with it. That's why it builds up as passive aggression, But if you're conscious of your mind and you don't vomit it out and dump it on your husband, you're going to catch it. And that's when you do the work. Ha, Robina. It's just your attachment, sweetie pie. You don't like his sound. It's just a sound. Your aversion is ripening. You want him, tell him to shut up and stop slurping his coffee. Shut your mouth. Mind your own business. Let him slurp his coffee. And leave it there. That's being your own therapist. And right there, you calm the anger down. That's daily practice. I swear to you. And if we can do this, we're sophisticated Buddhists, I promise you. Are we communicating? Catching the small moments. Don't wait for your husband to kill you before you get upset, okay? Notice the small moments, but that's our trouble. That's the wheels wobbling slightly. Grab it and then fix it. You apply maintenance, This is daily practice. I really, really mean it. It's not fancy. You can do a multitude of things. You can do a mantra there, but the real key job, if you want to know your own mind, you notice that's attachment, not getting what it wants. You notice, I want it to be this way. And that's what it is. Because aversion, if it arises, it is by definition, it is anger. And it is the response to your attachment. And attachment is this little child in there that wants what I want, Are we communicating? Any questions? Okay.
Okay. What can I do with the attachment to aversion?
What do you mean
When-
by that? I need to,
Well,
I sort of hear
enjoy
you,
being-
but really unpack it for me. What do you mean?
Okay, like enjoying my aversion,
Oh yeah,
enjoying.
okay, I see. Yeah. No, this is this is a huge problem, Chiaki. I mean, once we are angry, we just are in love with it. It's true. I know we can't stop thinking it. And when it's really strong, and I'm not, I'm not even talking about you shouting and yelling at people. The righteousness of it is so powerful, isn't it? When you see people fighting, you see people fighting. There's something supposedly cathartic about anger. People feel so good about being angry and having all the angry thoughts and of course we dress it up as virtue, especially when it's political activity. We dress it up as a virtue, that you're shouting and yelling and criticizing people. I mean, that's a gross level. But in our own mind, so it's incredibly hard. But because I think when we realize that all the afflictions, all the mental illnesses, all have the character of grasping, and they all have the character of holding on, whether it's jealousy, depression, anxiety. It's completely I-based, as we know. It's totally I-based, and it's like as if it's. But the other thing is, it's as if it's. The tragedy is we can see the main voices in our head that we don't have to invite are always the delusions. We don't have to invite them because the habit is so strong. They're running uncontrolled. We know that. And they're compulsive. They're compulsive. So all of them are compulsive. So we can see some people are completely involved in their depression. Some people, it sounds very cruel to say this, but we can see the intensity of the grasping character of all the neuroses. And when we're really caught up in those stories, we're completely kind of, like you said, like almost like in love with it all. And so there's a multitude of things. So to have enough intelligence to even notice objectively that's anger, that's this, and that's that. And then we can't stop the thoughts immediately if the habit is strong. And that's where the hard work is, even if it's just the slurping the coffee. But to catch it as soon as possible, and then to try to stop the righteousness. Because when we understand anger, it's incredibly self-righteous, isn't it? It's very righteous. And it can easily be interpreted as virtue, especially when it comes to political. So I think it takes a lot of courage to identify it as anger, to see the pain it's causing me, and to try and if we can't stop the thoughts, and the thoughts are very strong, then at least not buy into them. Let's let them rage on. Let them rage on, but refuse to believe their story. This is the hardest one, but we can't stop them because the habit is so strong, but not buying into them, not hearing the conceptual story, it is bad, he this, she that, hearing that conceptual story and trying not to believe it's true. This is really putting emptiness into place, not believing the story that anger says. Are you understanding my point? That's the key one. But you can't stop the thoughts. We want them to all go away. So there's a massive difference between hearing the angry thoughts and jumping into the middle of them and believing the angry thoughts. And the first step is to not believe them. Are you understanding me? And let them rave on. But it's tremendously hard, because you can't make it go away immediately. And then, of course, you keep trying every day, like simple one of slurping the coffee. And this is a really powerful one, and this is really putting emptiness into practice. When you realize it's a conceptual story, aversion is an interpretation of a sound. The interpretation is based on attachment. Attachment is an interpretation that only wants what I call good. So when I realize it's flexible, I can and this is taught in the Mahayana, this is taught in the Bodhisattva path, this is transforming problems into practice. This is advanced level. If we can, then decide to call the slurping good. I mean, I'm not trying to show off or say I'm a practitioner, I'm doing my best. But for example, I've got a neighbor downstairs, an old lady, older than me, and I'm old, and she's even older, and she has a walker, and she has different machines to help her breathe. Well, I can hear her machines all day. When I first moved here, I've never had a home of my own. In my 81 years, this is the first time there's a house that's labeled Robina's place. This is amazing. It's like my old age, and I can't believe how delicious it is. It's wonderful. Whatever reason, doesn't matter. Anyway, I moved in this lovely place with lovely things. I bought nice statues and everything. Someone gave me the money. And it was for my old age, and I'm editing, and I'm very happy. It's a different phase of my life now. Anyway, I realized I'm in this lovely apartment block in the West Village in New York City, and I realize I've got this noise downstairs. I've got this noise, and I can't make it go away. I mean, I had to really work on. I was really, 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 really work on my mind, because I knew I couldn't change it. I couldn't change it. I couldn't change it. I just couldn't. So I either would go mad, which is what happens. You get so angry and so upset and annoyed, and you sue the person. Look at the world, Or I decided two things. I had to learn not to pay attention to it, and when I noticed it, to call it good. I swear to you, this has been my only choice, and it's now been 3 years, and my mind is now content. But it takes a long time, and that's a simple example, and I'm sure you all know exactly what I'm talking about. And then I'm applying here the Bodhisattva path as well, having compassion that it's helping her breathe. And I try to think that. But I swear to you, I mean, we hear these things, but I didn't have a choice. It's like my friends in prison. They don't have the luxury of leaving. So, I mean, I'm amazed that I'm able to do it. I'm amazed that actually my mind is more content now. I can't get over it. It actually works, After all these years, it's working. Are we communicating here? This is the real skill. See, the very first level of teachings in the Hinayana level, there's no wriggle room there. Lord Buddha just says, control yourself. Mostly he even just says, control your body and control your speech. Just shut your mouth. Turn to stone, all those practical techniques. But as we get more sophisticated in knowing our mind well, and we start hearing the Bodhisattva teachings, and we start hearing about emptiness, we can apply all of that to these practices in our day-to-day life. I'm not trying to show off. I'm trying to be rejoicing that I managed to make it happen. I couldn't believe it, because I'm such an angry, volatile person. Are we communicating here? Because things don't have we're not set in stone. And that's what Buddha means by emptiness. Things don't have an inherent nature. But anger believes totally that is an ugly thing. And attachment believes totally that's a divine thing. We believe the stories like absolute concrete. And so as Lama Zopa says, it's bad enough that the thing out there appears, and I'm putting words here, appears through the lens of my anger and therefore appears ugly to me. Bad enough that happens. But the real killer is then the next step, which we then believe it is bad. We believe it is bad in itself. That's what keeps us paralyzed in samsara. So we can just decide and just think, well, I know it's slurping the coffee. I have an attachment. My aversion gets upset. I can't change it. So at least think I can learn to reinterpret that sound. It doesn't have a set in nature. It's not set in stone nature. Even just that puts atomic bombs under the delusions, I tell you. Because what keeps us in samsara is believing the story. And that's why it's so important to understand attachment and anger and jealousy and depression are all rooted in being conceptual stories. And they are misconceptions. That's why we're in samsara. And that's why they cause suffering. Anyway, I'm just talking here. Anyway, any other questions, any points? Do you want to have a break, I think? Do your little cup of tea and have a cake or something, and we can come back, yeah? So 7, 8, quarter, yeah. So maybe 30 minutes, and we can come back again. Have a little digest of these words along with your cup of tea. All right. And I'll see you in 30 minutes. Is that okay? Yeah.
Sounds
See you
good.
so now you're quarter past 11, aren't you? No, you're
10.
quarter past 10. So I'll see you at a quarter to 11, okay?
Yep.
Chiaki, you better call me 5 minutes before in case I forget. Thank you. See you soon.
Hello.
Recording in progress.
All right. So let's keep talking then. Well, I think I wanted to go into more detail, more questions, is this is a key point in understanding all of Buddhism, is that Buddha is saying we suffer because we have afflictions, and the key function of all these afflictions, these mental, I have to call them mental illnesses. You have to think of that word. He calls them afflictions because they're suffering, aren't they? And affliction is meaning when you have a problem. So he's not talking about physical problems, he's talking about mental ones. So a mental problem, mental illness. And it's the best way to say it, although it always sounds shocking to us, because we think of it in a very concrete way, a mental illness. Oh my God, I haven't got one of those, But that's what we all are. We all got these. And this is the thing. He just says that we're all got mentally ill. It's a question of degree. And he names them all, and they're all called the afflictions. This is very simple. But not only that, you see, it's not only those afflictions, the ones we learn about when we study, attachment, anger, the ones that are emotional. But the other ones, of course, all these misconceptions about reality. And the key point the Buddha's saying is that all the afflictions are, as I said before, are rooted in being concepts. And their point is that they're misconcepts, they're misconceptions. In other words, he's basically saying we suffer because we're not in touch with reality. So when we learn all about emptiness and dependent arising, we see then it's all about reality. But everything's about reality. So what do you think Buddha's teachings are? We start at the very beginning. He tells us about impermanence. Why do you think he's telling us about impermanence? He doesn't just want to rabbit on. Why? Because we have the opposite view that things are permanent. I mean, it's a misconception in our mind, deep in our bones. We've practiced for eons. And it's really, really subtle. So why we suffer is because simply there's a disconnect between what exists and how we think things exist. That's the whole point. This is like the general dualistic view that we have until we've realized emptiness, until we become Buddha. We're not in touch with reality. But there's different levels of reality for the Buddha. The very first one we learn about is how things are impermanent. And as we know very well, he talks about gross impermanence, which is, people die, cups break. But there's subtle impermanence. And even in some of the earlier views, if you study Drupta, Buddhist tenets, you've got to learn, there's the four main schools of thought. There's the Hinayana schools of thought. And the only remaining one that's existing these days is the Theravadana. It's the only remaining of one of the 18 schools of thought, I think, in the Sautrantika view. There's all these, these different viewpoints. And so even there, I think one of the views about subtle impermanence is that they mistake that for gross selflessness. So there's all these different views, and Buddha's saying they're all misconceptions. That's the whole point. That's why we suffer, because we're not in touch with reality. So he says, for example, he teaches about karma. Why? Cause and effect. Because guess what? If we're materialists, we think that our mind is the brain, and we think that our mother and father created us. That's the materialist view. Misconception, he says. We posit a creator. That's the big one. That's where he diverged from that very view of there being this intrinsic energy which is the source of the universe. It's called God. Not only that, but the little energy in here called self, called Atman, called soul, doesn't exist. Misconception. So there's all these levels of misconceptions, And then, of course, you get into the middle part of the practice, and we're going to go to all the afflictions. Well, they cause pain because they're habitual, but they really cause pain because they're not true. They're misconceptions. Anger is a misconception. Anger exaggerates the ugliness of the thing. Attachment exaggerates the deliciousness of the thing. Pride exaggerates our importance. Low self-esteem exaggerates our unimportance. All of these afflictions have this characteristic being concepts of being misconceptions, meaning they're not in touch with reality. Now, the virtues, what about them? Well, they are also concepts, but they are, relatively speaking, in touch with reality. They are valid concepts because they're rooted in dependent arising. This is the key thing. If we can get this, we can understand how to get enlightened. So the whole of the path really is just removing gradually misconceptions about reality, permanence, karma, all the mind, how they all function, and the six perfections, and then concentration, and then finally emptiness. When you've accomplished all of this, you're now in touch with reality. You're a Buddha. So why we suffer is because we're not in touch with reality, and that's hard to see. What do you mean I'm not in touch with reality? We don't realize that's why we suffer. Well, it's not complicated. If we understand all those afflictions are rooted in being misconceptions, they are concepts, but because they're ancient habits, they're now, because they affect the body and they're totally habitual, we've practiced them to perfection, we believe them in utterly, and so utterly we believe in them because they even things appear that way to us. As Lama Zopa says, bad enough, things appear wrongly to us, as I said before, through the lenses of our misconceptions. But the killer is we believe that it's true because the habits are so ancient, So it's a bit like it's sort of a bit like you've got $100. You've got a $500. You've got a $50 note. I mean, we don't have such things as 500, but just pretend we did. You've got a $50 note, but you're convinced it's 500, and you're so convinced. You've seen it for so long as 500, you actually see 2 zeros. That's how delusions work. The habit of attachment is so primordial, is so intense from countless lifetimes, that it's emotional hunger because of dissatisfaction, but then this concept that the over-exaggeration of the deliciousness of the cake literally projects onto that brown piece of stuff on the plate. We can say it validly is a chocolate cake, but seen through the lenses of attachment, which are so ancient and so habitual, coming from emotional hunger, it appears to us as totally delicious. It appears as vibrating deliciousness, as if deliciousness is in the cake along with the flour and the eggs, because of the habit of seeing it that way. And then you believe it, and then you grasp at it and wait for the happiness to come. And then, of course, you have your $50 note, you believe it's 500, you get all excited, you anticipate getting $500 worth. What do you think the result will be when you go to spend it? Bitter disappointment. That's why we suffer. Attachment makes everything appear delicious and divine, and we're so subtle we don't even notice. And then we exaggerate the importance of it. We exaggerate the power of the cake to make us happy. And it's just completely kind of instinctive because it's habitual. So, of course, there's only disappointment because the attachment believes that I'll get happy feelings, I'll get happiness. And we do get happy feelings. This is the subtle level of suffering, the suffering of change. All because of the afflictions, The first kind of suffering is obvious, the suffering of suffering, which is when bad things happen, which is basically when attachment doesn't get what it wants. Suffering of change is when attachment does get what it wants, which is happy feelings. Happy feelings do come. Buddha doesn't argue. Happiness does come. Happiness refers to happy feelings, and we'll go into this in a second. So when you get the cake, it does trigger a happy feeling, but attachment's sitting right there on your shoulder. First of all, it's been anticipating, all excited, anticipating getting $500 worth, anticipating, building up the excitement, building up, believing when I get it, I'll get happy, I'll get $500 worth, and then you get happy feelings. And the thing is, you get the cake in the mouth, it does trigger happy feelings, both sensory, not mental so much, but sensory, definitely. But what happens? Attachment's also there. And instantly the cake goes in the mouth and the happy feeling comes. Attachment, whose nature is dissatisfaction, will be disappointed. Oh, it's not enough, Robina. Put another piece in. I'm not happy yet. Attachment still feels dissatisfied. And so it's downhill from there. We know that because this lie is taking place. So we keep eating it, hoping for happiness to come. And before you know it, it's turned into aversion. You want to vomit. This is samsara. So the afflictions are delusional. Literally, they are delusional. They are lies. They are misconceptions in the bones of our being that we've practiced believing in for eons. The grasping of things is permanent. It's very close to attachment. It's another distinctive viewpoint, though. Like yourself, when you're in love with somebody. Always a quote, one, I don't remember, it doesn't matter who it is, I remember reading magazines and things, and one person, famous person, and she said when they were in love with a husband, and she said, we will be together until we are 80, she said. So what's that going? That's attachment, incredibly excited, anticipating, getting the joy does come, and because it's happy now, and because attachment is in a constant state of panic because it can't bear the thought of it changing, and we know from habit that it will, then we put another lie on top of it that is permanent. We will be together until we are 80. It's literally a fantasy. You might be, but there's no guarantee. But we believe we will be. That's the lie of permanence, you know. All these lies in our mind, all supporting each other, totally automatically, and at very subtle levels. So all we can do is start where we are and unpack, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle. So we suffer because we're not in touch with how things exist, not just with emptiness, but with everything. There are layers of lies. And so each step of the way, how the path is presenting the lies at different stages that we have to counteract, you know, and argue with and deconstruct until eventually, you know, we've removed the fundamental lie, the lie of an intrinsic me, and intrinsic everything else. And when that's removed, we then perfect that, combine it with bodhicitta, and we're Buddha, you know. Any questions? What time is it? 9 o'clock. Okay. Any questions? Come on, people. I'm doing all the talking. Ask me some questions. Did you have a discussion during your break? You didn't something you just want to come up with when you discussed? Come on, talk to me. Well, I can't force you, but I'm sure once we get started, we can have a discussion. Come on.
Hi,
Anything.
Rebecca.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming online. You said to discuss what we discussed in the break. Well, we actually had a little celebration for His Holiness the 41st. It's his birthday today, according to the
Oh, I wonder what does that
calendar.
mean? The 41st is the Lama is the one I know from 40 years ago. You mean
Yes.
the father of the current, the uncle or the father of the latest? Oh, yeah, that's right. So it's his birthday today. Oh, how wonderful! What he's the same age as me. He's born in 1944. Oh, yeah, we're both born in 1944. Year of the monkey.
Yeah.
September. That means he's Virgo. Okay, wonderful.
Well, that's according to the Western calendar. Yeah. So, well, I'm just wondering what teachings you might have had from His Holiness, or your affiliation with him.
My what?
Affiliation, if you like.
Yeah, he's one of my
know
lamas for sure. I remember Chen Raising Institute in Queensland when in 1988 when I was the spiritual program coordinator there, and His Holiness came. He was at the centre, and so I was the umza. I led all the prayers and things, and I love him. He's one of my favourite lamas. I love him. Anyway, ask me some questions. Come on. Let's just gossip. Let's just gossip. It's nice to talk about the lama, but I don't want to do that. Ask me some questions. Come on, you people. Sitting there looking all so holy, Buddhist, sitting cross-legged. Come on. Please, anything. Just open up your mouths. Talk. Say rabbit on. I don't care how stupid it sounds. Come on.
Hello, Robina. Nice to see you again. It's been a long time.
Who is that?
Amanda.
Okay. Good, darling. Talk to me.
Okay. So I'm wondering about the practice or being in remade practice where you're sort of touching a little bit of all different sects, because I've spent 30 years in Gelug and now I'm in the
30 years what? 30 years what, darling?
Studying Gelug practices.
Oh, good. Okay, fine.
With Geshe Dawa in Sydney.
Sure, yeah.
And when you come to a different location and that particular practice isn't available, and so you go to different practices.
That's right, sure.
The
but they fundamentally come down to the same thing. I mean, in the end, you've got to realize emptiness and get bodhicitta, isn't it?
Yeah. And so different teachers give you different links to that.
That's right, exactly, according to your capacities. Are you finding teachers that suit your mind?
Yeah.
You are?
Yeah. Well, Kempo is
done. Are you finding the teachings on emptiness different or confusing or from other teachings that you've received, or you're finding a way to see them all in the, is it helpful for you, having different teaching?
The Autumn Buddhist Philosophy course that was through Drogmi Institute.
Through which institute?
Drogmi Institute. Kempo
I don't know what what's that?
Kempo Nawang Damcho is a teacher down in Tilba.
Okay, go on.
He initiated the Buddhist philosophy course. We went through 3 years of doing Theravada, Vajrayana,
That's right. Wonderful. Yeah.
And it's been very good, but we're at
Wonderful.
the stage now of emptiness and just reviewing that. And they're very valid teachings. It's just a matter of practicing, like you say, that you have to develop the bodhicitta. You have to keep your mind coming back to it. And hearing you today about the delusions has been really helpful. Thank you.
Good. All right, darling. I'm happy. Good one. Happy to see you. Keep moving, darling. What else, people? Questions? Points to discuss?
Just a quick one, Robina. You said
Yeah.
that grasping was close to attachment, but not the same thing. Is that what you're saying?
What I was saying in general, all the afflictions, all the delusions have the character of grasping. Like, Chiaki's point about how can we stop in being attached to the anger. When we're caught up in these emotions, we know it's like they're poisoning us, but it's like it's like we're completely addicted to them. So they've all got the character of grasping, is what I'm saying. Do you understand? That's what I'm saying. All of them have the character of grasping. And of course, they're all rooted in the root delusion, the root grasping at things as an intrinsic I. That's what I'm trying to say. You understand my point?
Yes, thank you.
They're kind of very unhappy, but they're all, when we're caught up in these things, it's like we're addicted to them. We can see that. When a person's full of self-pity, I'm not being mean, you can't stop talking about it. When a person's arrogant, when we're angry, when we're attached, they all have this character of being very fixed. And they've got this kind of, it's like, and this is why anger is so ironic. If you see two people fighting, you'd think they'd want to run away from each other. But that, you try to stop them fighting, they'll tell you, shut up and mind your own business and run back together and keep fighting. It's like it's attachment. Because all the delusions are like that. They're so weird, it's so strange and unhappy. We're addicted to them, and the habit is so strong, and we identify with them. This is what I was trying to say. We identify, especially, this is me. I am angry person. I am this. I am that. We paint this picture of ourselves, Or it's like when you've got a lot of self-pity, a lot of self-criticism, we all have it. And someone says you've got really good qualities. No, I haven't. And 27 people can praise us, and we won't believe them. One person criticizes and we will believe it totally, which proves what we think about ourselves, which is garbage. We are addicted to the delusions, it's so ironic. It's the irony of ego is we're addicted to all these unhappy states of mind, so it's hard to get rid of them. But one thing I want to talk about too is when we study the mind, you've got the positives, you've got the negative, neurotic, deluded misconceptions that are full of so much pain and nonsense. You've got the virtues, which are our saving grace, which we have to cultivate. And the third lot of these, I call them mechanics, but there's one in there that's really fascinating. It doesn't sound like mechanics. It doesn't sound like concentration or discrimination or things like that. And it's called feeling. And it's a huge one in Buddhist psychology. Lord Buddha points it out as one of the 5 main components of a person. He takes form is the first one. Then he takes 2 of those mental factors, feeling and discrimination, because of the massive role they play in our suffering. So feeling is really, that both of those are in the 3rd category. They're not non-virtues. They're not delusions. They're not afflictions. They are in this 3rd category, these states of mind that I call mechanics. And feeling is a crucial one to understand. And it's not used in the same way that we use the word feeling as an equivalent for emotion. Nothing to do with that. Basically, there are only 3 kinds of feeling: pleasant, unpleasant, and neither. So forget the neutral, forget the neither. Just don't even think about them. Let's look at the other 2. Now, we know that all any being wants is happy feelings. That's what we mean by happiness. Happiness cannot be a function of an outside object. That's a bizarre concept, but that really shows how deluded we are. We believe the cake. Not only is the cake the cause of my happiness, we even believe the cake somehow is the happiness. We're so addicted to the outside world, in other words, that we really believe happiness is out there. When, if you're telling me about your happiness, I'll say, tell me, why are you happy? Or tell me about your happiness. You will describe the cake. You will describe the boyfriend. You will describe the event. That's just the catalyst, But so this is so confusing to us. But happiness necessarily is a mental or a sensory state of mind. And it happens to be triggered, yes, by the cake, by the boyfriend. So it's mental and it's sensory. So you have mental happy feelings and you have sensory happy feelings. You have mental unhappy feelings and you have sensory unhappy feelings. So our trouble is we can't distinguish between, let's say, attachment, which is a delusion, a misconception that exaggerates the deliciousness of the cake, exaggerates the power of the cake to make me happy. We give it far more power than it's got. We completely confuse that. We assume that attachment is virtually the same as the happy feeling that's triggered when you eat the cake, but they're completely separate parts of the mind. Feeling is neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. And Lord Buddha, basically, in one way of saying it, is telling us, you know what, guys, your mind in its nature, has the natural capacity for utter bliss, utter joy, happiness. Happy feelings are the natural state of a mind to the degree that it's unencumbered by afflictions. Happiness is what we're aiming for. The Four Noble Truths are all about how to get happy. He puts it in terms of how to stop suffering. He means how to end up with happiness. And what is going to get happy, not your nose or your cake, is your mind. So happy feelings, pleasant feelings, and we can see there's a spectrum of them. Anything from a vaguely nice feeling, that the cake triggers, to the most intense bliss on the planet. They're all called pleasant feelings. And all we want, all sentient beings ever want, is happy feelings. So the tragedy is, of course, samsara we believe that the cake is the cause of the happy feelings. The boyfriend is the cause of the happy feelings, that our objects of our senses are the cause of our happy feelings, which is why we all suffer so terribly, because as Lama Zopa points out, happy feelings that are triggered by attachment, particularly, let's say, the objects of the senses, for objects of the senses, that happiness is happiness, but it doesn't last. And it can't grow. This is why we all go mad in the world, because we all identify with the body. We all believe happiness is getting sensory objects, money, people, jobs, things. That's what instant gratification means. It means getting the senses what they want. And so we wonder why we end up suffering, because the happy feelings that come from meeting the cake can't grow. They can only diminish. Happy feelings that come from the best sex on the planet cannot continue. They can only diminish. This is why we all go mad. So happy feelings, sensory, are fine, but they're really the gross level. Well, Lord Buddha's long-term goal is to help us get mental happiness, which is what we get just even from shamatha. The bliss, Lama Yeshe talks about it, the bliss of just having even some level of decent concentration is inconceivable. The Hindus found this. Not to mention the bliss of having achieved nirvana. Inconceivable levels of bliss. We're talking about our own mind. So I find that so encouraging, that the Buddha's view is how to get the mind to be happy. Now, this is where he talks about the delusions. Following delusions can only ever, right now, cause unhappy feelings. And then because we act upon them and create negative karma, they're going to ripen in the future as extremely unhappy feelings, as more of the delusions, and then lower realm suffering and all the other experiences that are totally suffering, But suffering and happiness finally are to do with the mind. And then due to karma, and this is a tragedy, when we follow attachment, believing that I'll get happy, the motivation for eating the cake is just only attachment, and only it brings disappointment. So you've increased your attachment. And so not only did we not get satisfaction, we actually increased the dissatisfaction, and we increase the craving for more cake. As my mother used to say to me as a little girl, you know, I'd think and think and think about it because I was attached to my food. She'd say, the more you get, the more you want. And we can see it. This is the total tragedy of the happy feelings that we get now via the senses or based on attachment to anything. Attachment to reputation, attachment to money, attachment to people loving us, attachment to nice sounds, attachment to music, whatever it is. It can't grow. It can only diminish. And that's why we all suffer so terribly. Go mad, want to kill ourselves and everybody else. So happy feelings come from practicing virtue, not immediately. But so this is even where we look at our lives now. Every second of the day, if you add it up, each moment, you'd either be having a happy feeling or an unhappy feeling. There's no other choice, people. Forget the neutral ones. Every second of the day, you're either having a happy feeling or an unhappy one. And they're ever so subtle, you don't notice. And every moment of a happy feeling, whatever triggered it, is the fruit of a past virtuous action. And every moment of an unhappy feeling is the fruit of a past negative action. So every action we do now based on attachment, based on anger, sows a seed, drops a seed into our mind that can only ripen in the future in any of the four ways, suffering ways, a lower rebirth, lower realm rebirth, the tendency to keep doing it, an experience similar to it at the hands of others, and an environmental result. That's karma, you know. So we're creating constant future suffering by following attachment, following anger, following pride, following jealousy, following depression, and doing actions with our body and speech on the basis of them. And this is technical. This is not punishment and reward, because Buddha is not a punisher and not a rewarder. There's no punisher and rewarder in Buddhism, but we just hear it the same as Christianity. But there's no punisher. We do it to ourselves, you know. So this is technical. These are Lord Buddha's technical explanations of how to be happy and how to stop suffering. So then this is the thing about, you know, the suffering, the tragedy of attachment. Suffering that comes from anger is pretty obvious, but the suffering that comes from attachment is very, very sad. So I always use the example. There's one time I remember one mother in Kopan Monastery. She asked me about her son. She came to my room in tears, and she'd heard about karma from Lama Zopa, and she was thinking about her son who died 5 years before. He was a fisherman, and he all his life spent his life fishing, and he died scuba diving. And she was sad. She was crying. Where's he been reborn? You know, she'd never thought about these things. Anyway, I remember. I said to her, well, no, I don't know, but go and ask this one Lama. One of our Lamas was an amazing yogi, spent years in the mountains, you know. And these Lamas very rarely tell you what they see with their clairvoyance, but for some reason it was beneficial for her to hear it. And she gave the name of her boy, who died 5 years before. He'd been a fisherman all his life. And she said, where's he been reborn? And he said, first he was born he checked his mind, you know, his Google. They've got this total perfect memory, these holy beings. They can access their memory, you know. And he said, first he was born in the animal realms and now he's in the hell realms. And she said, oh no, what can I do for him? And he kind of laughed sadly. And he said, what do you mean just for him? He said, for everybody. I met her years later, and she's not a Buddhist, but she said she was very moved by that, this talk of compassion, you know. But this is the technical teachings of the Buddha. They're all there for us to learn. Like advice of how to learn, how to live, advice of how to be happy and not suffer. Because happiness and suffering are there every millisecond. And they're not virtue, they're not non-virtue. But we have to distinguish between them, which is really hard. So every millisecond of any unhappy feeling, or indeed any unhappy experience, someone's mean to you, it's the fruit of your non-virtue. Every moment of any pleasant, even a pleasant feeling of tasting the cake, it's a fruit of virtue. So anyway, this fisherman, I'm sorry, back to the story. It's a really good example of how the 12 noble, not the 12 noble, the 12 links work. So, you know, for example, particularly the two called craving and grasping and feeling, in about 6th and 7th and 8th, I think they are. So here's this boy. Let's just describe how this works. And this is the tragedy of samsara, you know. So there he is, due to past, that he obviously got a human birth in this life. So obviously he'd killed in the past. But he'd been in the lower realms. He finished that karma. And then, like a miracle, one day his mind, he got a human mummy, born in California, and he had all this virtuous karma, lots of good karma, a good human birth, good tendencies. He had good experiences, good environment, but he had a particular tendency to kill, and this is the tragedy. And we look at the world. You look at the world. Most humans who got a human birth as a result of non-killing, but because they haven't purified all the killing karma, like this boy, he wakes up in this life with a human body, the fruit of non-killing, but as in terms of the tendency to keep doing, he hadn't purified all of his killing karma. So he wakes up in this life, among other of his tendencies in his mind, he's got good ones as well, he continues to kill. So there he is. This is what happens. This is the tragedy I'm trying to point out, doing things on the basis of attachment, you know. So there he is, he's this little boy, and he hadn't thought of killing, and one day someone took him fishing. So suddenly that triggers the 12 links, that triggers the one called contact, which is where you make contact, in this case for him, with a particular karmic object, which was called fishing. Suddenly that instantaneously triggers the next one, which is feeling. And for him, it was extremely pleasant feeling. And what that is the fruit of is from the habit of having killed in the past. So he suddenly sees fishing, contact is made, it triggers the karma somehow, like it's like a memory, you know, and then he has very, very pleasant feelings. And then the next millisecond, attachment kicks in and paints a really delicious picture of the whole thing. And so of course he's won the lottery. Now he's found his purpose in life. He's going fishing, and the attachment makes it appear divine. It triggers really pleasant feeling, and that pleasant feeling, the extent of our pleasant feeling on the basis of meeting whatever object it is the extent of our habit from having done it before. So the tragedy is, because it triggered pleasant feelings and then intense attachment came, which painted a delicious picture, he spent the rest of his life fishing. And this is the tragedy of doing harm to others based on attachment, that it looks delicious. He never, ever saw the suffering of those fish. That's the tragedy of attachment, you know. So because we all are junkies for good feelings, in his case, the habit of killing in the past caused killing fish to give him those pleasant feelings. So of course he thinks it's good. He doesn't see suffering. He thinks it's wonderful. He thinks of fishing all day. His entire life was based on fishing. All his schedule for his life, all his money, everything was based on fishing. And because he had attachment for it, attachment makes it look delicious. So all those hundreds of thousands of fish flapping in his boat, agonizing, dying, and agonizing death, he could not see it. He was as blind as a bat. His mother went fishing with him one time, she said, and she didn't have attachment to killing, so she could see the suffering of the fish, but he could never see it. That's the tragedy of attachment, you know, it blinds us. So to understand the 12 links is so important. All these things, all Lord Buddha's technical teachings are so important to understand, because they explain happiness, they explain suffering, they explain the causes, and Buddha explains how to stop it. That's the point, you know. Are we communicating, people? We should have such compassion, you know, for ourselves first, and then for other sentient beings, because we create our own reality. And this is why they say all the bodhisattvas have such compassion for us, because we don't realize cause and effect. We don't realize that we create our own happiness and our own suffering. So we are like these lemmings, you know. And this is the total tragedy. And that's why the first stages of practice, the Hinayana, are all about compassion for yourself. They don't say it that way. It's learning to know about your own suffering and what causes it, and being sick of it and wanting to give it up. Then we can practice compassion for others, you know. And until we have it for ourselves, we can never properly get compassion and bodhicitta. No way in the world. because compassion is for everybody, including the harmers, including the crummy politicians, including the ex-husband, including the pedophiles. And the basis for that is karma. Without understanding karma, we cannot have compassion for the harmers. Not possible. What do you think, people? No questions? Questions, anybody? Yes, we have.
Hi, Robina.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Speak clearly and loudly, though.
Okay. I've been thinking about climate change and the environment and the practice. And I think we all know that we're heading in a really bad direction.
In respect to what?
In respect to a world that is inhabitable for humans, actually.
Oh, I see. Okay, so yes, of course, exactly. So then go on. Good. Yes. Then.
And even in Thich Nhat Hanh's in their community at the moment, they talk a lot about the acceptance of how civilizations come and go, and having peace about that.
Yeah.
Getting to the point where we have peace about death, basically, which includes humans. So I'm wondering about, I mean, if we basically, worst case scenario, if we become extinct, humans, which actually it's starting to become very real, that if we don't do something very drastic to turn around climate change, we may not have an Earth that humans can live on.
So then the question is?
And well, the question is, I can have acceptance of that and peace around that. I can have a practice around that, which I've started to have a feeling around. Except if we don't have humans, then how are we going to...
If you don't have what, darling? If you don't have what?
If we don't have human beings, then how is it possible to have enlightenment?
Oh, I see. No, I understand that. No, okay. I understand your point. Well, if we look at the big picture, then the Buddha's describing what he's describing is, when he talks about samsara, he's talking about mind, sentient beings, mind possessors. And as we know, he's saying mind possessors, due to how we think and act and do things, have literally set ourselves up to have different kinds of experiences. And he labels them a hell being, spirits, animals, humans, gods. We know that they're just different kinds of minds with coming along with a different level of physicality and different levels of karmic experiences. Okay, right. So now the thing is, all these states they're really mental states. Human is a particular kind of state of mind. Animal is a state of mind. And the thing is, they're not, I mean, I don't know when humanity started on this planet, but we have to think, well, I wonder where the humans were before, because virtue is not a new thing. The minds are beginningless. So there's always been virtue. Therefore, there always must have been some type of human realm of existence. So before the human planet, a human mind was a mind of mostly virtue. Virtue is what defines us as human, because we all share the delusions with animals. But before this planet, it seems to me, how they talk about, human life the mind was very subtle. Therefore, the physical energy was very subtle. The four elements manifested as like light bodies, and virtue was very powerful. And we could get enlightened. Lives lasted 1,000 years. So they talk like this, And so we have to assume that there's going to continue to be humans somewhere. I mean, not in the sort of simple way we think, oh, we're all going to rush off to Mars and join Mr. Musk and get on one of his aeroplanes. But we're always if we are creating virtue right now, if we are creating non-killing, if we're living in vows, we are creating a human rebirth somewhere or other. So we shouldn't have to worry about it. We're creating it right now. I mean, we're thinking in terms of eons here. Do you understand me, darling? There mightn't be this planet, but it's only one of kind of probably in terms of the human way of seeing it, it's only one instance of a type of reality. It's the best I can say. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Saying that,
Did you hear what I was trying to say?
I think what you're saying is that there's always hope that there will be some kind
No, I
of,
did not say hope ever. I didn't ever say that word.
say that
No.
word.
Oh, I'll say it again. I'll say it for you. Okay. Here we've got a bunch of people on this planet right now called human. And we have a bunch of people sitting in this room right now living in vows of morality. Would that be correct, sweetheart?
Okay. Yep.
So
Yep.
every time any one of us lives in our vow of non-killing, we are putting seeds in our mind that will inevitably and inexorably ripen in the future as a type of positive rebirth. Whether you like it or not, we are, right this minute, we are creating future human realms, darling. That's what I'm
Okay.
saying.
In
I
the
mean,
conscious of
in the bigger picture point of view, every second we are practicing virtue now, we are creating the cause to have some kind of human life somewhere or other, guaranteed. Karma takes care.
Okay, I guess I'm wondering about collective karma, and if there's just way too much negative collective karma to combat on a positive level. I'm wondering if it's possible.
I'm
what
a
you're
bit lost about that, darling. I don't understand your point. Say it again. That second point. What was you just said?
Well, just seems like collectively our karma is so difficult at the moment in terms of the
I
environment.
mean, I keep hearing people say this, but I don't know if it's true, is it? I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to disagree with saying that the environment's in a terrible place, but I mean, okay, say it again in a different way. What are you asking me this particular point?
Well, life will, if just purely on a climate change perspective, we will be the ones that will suffer. Humans and animals and life on the planet will suffer because we will get to a point where just pure science, we just can't live on an earth that's too
Okay,
hot.
so go on. So the question is?
So the question is around, do we just let that play out?
Okay, no,
Darling,
no, you're not factoring in karma here. You're not factoring in karma. I'm suggesting this. It's not set in stone, sweetheart. I mean, what we're experiencing now, we call it environmental because of this and that 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. This is from 50 million years ago of karma. Environmental karma, having a lousy environment, is the collective karma of past killing of a million lives ago. We are now experiencing the fruit of it. So if we all practice non-killing and we practice living in vows, that is what creates virtue in the future and happiness in the future and happy, positive environments. That's what I'm trying to say. You don't just sit here and passively cross your fingers and put the plastic in the right bin and then just give up. You keep practicing virtue. There's no choice. You keep practicing virtue and live in vows of morality. That is what creates future happiness in whatever realm you damn well like. Forget this piece of stupid earth. You don't give up. You try to get bodhicitta. You try to help others. Your mind is creating virtue every second, every karma every second. It can only ripen in the future. It can't disappear. Are you hearing my point?
I am hearing you. I'm wondering if it's enough.
Enough instead of what, dear?
Instead
of what are you suggesting instead? Be depressed?
I guess in the environmental movement, for instance, they're trying to do all sorts of really radical things to make.
Sweetheart, listen, do all of that, but what is radical is non-fucking killing. And non-stealing and non-lying and non-harming. They are the cause of a beautiful environment. They are the cause. So all the people putting their plastic in the right place and doing this and doing that, and you call it radical, if they're still angry and resentful and being attached, they're pissing their lives down the toilet.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand
You're
that.
communicating with me.
So
So just
I guess
keep
I'm talking
going
about
with
those.
optimism. What the hell else? Bodhisattvas think in terms of eons, baby. So do all your right things for the physical world, but live in vows. That's the way. That not living in vows and past killing are why we're living in a shitty environment. Not just because of the plastic and that. Do both, baby, and just don't give up.
Okay, so do both. So
Holy God, what the hell else would you think?
philosophy and also try and do something for someone else or collectively for the planet.
What, darling?
So look after myself. So be as virtuous as I can be.
That's
And
all you
also,
can do is live in vows. This is the first stages of practice. This is the first stages of practice that is the cause of you having a future happy life and a future good environment and future good friends and future happiness and joy. You've got to have that. And then you help others. That's the Bodhisattva path, baby. And you help in whatever way you can.
okay,
This is the
thanks.
point.
Yeah.
Are we communicating?
Yep.
Do you think? Sweetheart? Back there with the microphone. Are we communicating?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
And have
I guess
enthusiasm and
had-
optimism. Enthusiasm and optimism. Just keep going.
Okay.
This is the fruit of 10 million lives ago, you know. It's not just last week when we started doing plastic and gas and whatever the air is. I'm being sarcastic here, but get my point. There's a million things we can do, and many people are doing radical, clever things. But if it's done not based in virtue, it's pissing it all down the toilet. I mean, this is only if you've got a view of karma. If you don't have much confidence in the view of karma, then I'm wasting my time talking to you. It's only whether you've got that understanding. And that's why we have to understand Buddha's teachings if we call ourselves Buddhist. Do you understand my point? You don't have to have the Buddha's view. I'm not forcing you. But we've got to have the Buddhist analysis first, as well as the physical one. Both. Do you understand me? Sweetheart?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay. Excuse me swearing. I always swear I won't swear again, but when I get excited, I swear. Excuse me. So listen, it's time to go, but are there any, or is maybe not time to go, was it time? No, we've got another time. We've got more time. Keep talking. 10 o'clock to finish, a whole 30 minutes. Please, this is good discussion now. Come on. But, okay, so let me just say more about karma. Okay, say more about karma. If we take this Buddhist view that minds are beginningless, well, first of all, this is the nuttiest thing we've ever heard. And even to say it seems silly. Because we all have this very powerful concept that there must be a first moment. The Christians teach these big teachings on first cause. They have teachings, capital F, capital C. That's where they posit a creator. And everybody instinctively wants a first moment. We want a first moment, desperately want a first moment. When did I begin? When did suffering begin? When did karma begin? When did the universe begin? When did it begin? And all this very questioning is a completely false question because it's coming from a view in our mind of permanence. It's coming from a philosophical view deep in the bones of our being that somehow things are set in stone, you know. It's very subtle. If Buddha's positing cause and effect, which he is as the main cause of as the fundamental law that runs the universe, then by definition you can't have a first moment. You can't have a first cause. Remember His Holiness talking to all the planet people, you know, all the people, and he said, Big Bang, no problem, just not the first Big Bang, that's all. There's been endless, I mean, we can't cope with the idea there's been beginningless lives. It just sounds too wacky to us, you know. But this is the Buddhist view of karma and the analysis of cause and effect. That's why we don't need a creator. We don't need a creator, you know. But we always want to go back to, that's what the question scientists are doing, going back, digging deep, trying to find the first moment, the first Big Bang, the first this. Where did it all begin? It's complete misconception. It's cause and effect. It's a radical, constant, ongoing thing. So given this, our minds go back and back and back and back. We are experiencing karma, you know, from it could be a million lives ago. Environmental karma, for example, of COVID. That was collective karma of past killing. One of the karmic, so there are 4 ways our karma ripens. One type of rebirth, in our case, human. 2, the tendencies in our mind, positive or negative. 3 is called our experiences, similar to the cause. So all the way we're seen and treated by others, because we're very social beings. That's a third way our karma ripens. And the 4th is the very physical world we live in. So the very way the physical environment impacts upon us, you know, that's due to, so all these 4 ways. So the 4 ways of killing, for example, to ripen, the first result, would be a type of rebirth that isn't human, for sure, animal or one of the others. That's the fully ripened result of killing. But within the human life, we can see the other 3 ways are ripening as a result of killing. The second one is the tendency to kill. Well, look at the tragedy of the human planet. Most humans kill. Most humans think it's completely reasonable to kill rats and cockroaches and millions of ants and millions of animals and millions of fishes. Even if we're vegetarian, all the millions of creatures that get slaughtered for the vegetarian food. Don't think you're some kind of bloody saint because you don't eat meat. You know, I mean, slaughtered. Animals are slaughtered, billions of them. We kill and even most religions say it's cool to kill. So killing is one of the worst things possible. And one Lama said, if you want to give any advice to anybody, the one piece of advice he'd give is don't kill. Because the heaviest negative action, the heaviest harm to sentient beings. So the fruit of killing is lower realm. Second one is a tendency to keep killing. And this is the worst one because it sends us right back to the lower realms. You know, it's a total tragedy. Or if like the fisherman, you complete the negative lower realms karma, but you haven't purified all aspects. So you wake up in this life with a nice human body due to non-killing, but you have the karma to keep on killing. And what do? He sent himself right back to the lower realms, you know. This is the total tragedy. So the first way killing ripens, lower realms. Second way, tendency to keep killing. Third way, you get killed or you die young. Look at the world. Fourth, environmental result of killing is sickness and sickness and things like that. But polluted environment, that's the fruit of attachment karma. Having stinky, smelly, disgusting environment, that's not the fruit of killing. That's the fruit of sexual misconduct. Having environments where there's all the ugly things about the environment, broken and disgusting and smelly and polluted, that's all the fruit of all the different non-virtues. Killing, of lying, steal, of lying, of speech. They're the ones that create the polluted environment. And the killing one is the one that poisons the environment. So where food harms you, the air is polluted, the water's polluted, you get sick all the time. That's the fruit of killing. So COVID was a collective karma of millions of people from probably 1 million lives ago. As a result of collective killing, we are now experiencing the fruit of collective killing, and we all get killed just by kissing your auntie. You die, you know. So, all I'm saying is none of the present scientific views necessarily are contradicted, but this is a different analysis of why things happen. And if we say we're Buddhists, I don't know, it's up to us, but if we never heard this before, it means we haven't studied Buddhism. Not trying to be rude here. Are we communicating here? So then you apply both. You treat look at Tibetan, look at the bloody Tibetans, all right? They didn't need to learn about environmentalism. Why do they have a pristine environment back when they were there? Because they lived in vows. They didn't kill anything. They might have killed a few yaks or let the Muslims kill a couple of yaks so they could eat their chops or something, you know? But they'd never killed a worm. There was no environmentalism. There was incredible flowers and beautiful things and minerals, and the earth was intact because they lived in virtue. So we can go and do all the right things in terms of science, but not live in virtue. It's pissing your life down the toilet. So do both. But have a logical reason why things are happening. If you like the Buddha's view, I'm not making any of this up. It's all in the literature. It's all there. Are we communicating, people? And I've only studied like 5% of Buddhism. You know, I haven't studied much. I like the Buddhist view, that's all. I find it delicious. Okay. I get very excited. You can see. So what else, people? Talk to me. Questions.
My question is,
Who's I? Where's I? Where are you? Put your hand up. Oh, I see you now. I see you, darling. Yes, talk to me.
My question is to do with believing in the soul.
Believing in a soul. You mean, is there a soul or isn't there? I don't care about belief. I'm not into the word belief. I never use the word belief. I don't want to know about belief. So frame your question again. What's your question?
Is there a soul or the Buddhist concept of not having a soul? Can you explain that?
I can, darling, a little bit. I'll try and do it in simple words. Yeah. So Buddha came through this amazing Indian system, as I've been telling you, and they had the view of karma, they had the view of the mind, they were geniuses, they unpacked the mind, they went so far, but they had the view, and this is where Buddha diverged very specifically from those views. And that is the view that they had, which is similar to the Christian teaching, similar to the Muslim teaching, that there is some essential, permanent, unchanging energy in us that comes from a creator. This is the whole point, that comes from a holy being, that comes from a creator, that defines who we are. Broadly speaking, would you agree that something sounds like a soul? Sweetheart?
Yes.
I'm asking. Yes. Okay, good. So the Hindus talk about karma, whereas the Christians don't. They say God put the soul in the egg and the sperm or whatever, And so that's what they say. But the Hindus still talk about karma. But when you fully develop from their perspective, you discover the true nature of your own Atman, your own self, your own soul, and you become oneness with God, this energy that is the source of the universe, right? So it's maybe more sophisticated than the Christian view or the Muslim view, but it's still with some essential, permanent, uncaused, unchanging energy called a soul, and it's the same philosophy about a creator. Now, Buddha, from his own direct experience, said he went further and said, no, that's still a misconception. So he says that there isn't a permanent, solid, unchanging, intrinsic energy. He doesn't say there's no I, because the words self or I or me or person are all synonymous. So the Christians use the word soul or spirit, and so do the Muslims, but the Hindus use the word Atman, self. And so there's not a question Buddha's saying there's no self. That's obvious. There is a self. Self is the term we use instead of saying I, me, person, self. They all mean the same thing. So we are each of the people in this room, we are one of those types of phenomena. But all he is saying is the kind of self that's permanent and unchanging and inherent, that self doesn't exist. He's not saying there's no self. It's the way that we exist is where he has a different view. He says there is an I, there are things, but they're not intrinsic, they're not permanent, they're not set in stone, they're not uncaused. They're highly dynamic things that change from moment to moment that don't have an inherent intrinsic character. How does that sound? Is that helpful?
Yeah, I understand better than I did before. I still find it difficult, but especially
which is the part? But which is the part that's difficult? What do you mean difficult? Which bit's difficult?
If I look at it in the context of rebirth, Buddhist rebirth, and what's being reborn, part of what's past.
So what's the question? Just give me a question.
What is in the context of rebirth?
Yeah.
In Buddhism.
Yeah.
What is being reborn?
I understand, darling. So what may I know your name?
Rob.
Who?
Rob. R-O-B.
Rob. Okay, that's me. I'm Rob with an I or N-A on the end. Okay. Oh, Rob. Okay, good. Listen. So Rob, okay, now we're talking about what exists and what doesn't in the universe. So, and this is a very important point for the Buddha because he says we're living in la la land, believing in things that don't exist. So Here's so we look in the room here and we can see there are flowers, cushions, thermos flasks, cupboards, and people. Would you agree there's a bunch of different phenomena in the room? Would you agree with that, Rob?
Yes.
Okay, and the persons in the room, they are a type of phenomenon. Buddha says the universe consists of millions of different things that exist, cups and toilets and people. So person is one. We are a bunch of people. That's the term that we would use to refer to us, as opposed to toilet or cup. Would you agree?
Yes.
Relative, so that we have to have the conventional reality, and then there's ultimate reality, Buddha says. So we have persons sitting in the room. So you are a person, you are an I, you are a me, you are a self. All those words mean the same thing. You so far so good?
Yes.
You're one of those, so am I. So now, what are we made up of? We have to look into how things what do they consist of? What are the component parts of a cushion? Well, you could look into that, and then you know how to make a cushion. The component parts of a computer, you look into that, and you can make you can work out what a computer is. Well, the component parts of a person are two: mind and body. So far, so good?
Yes.
Mind and body. And the Buddha's view about the mind, fundamental from his own direct experience, is it's not physical, Rob. Your consciousness, your mind is like a river of mental moments. You've got your sensory consciousness and your mental consciousness. So think of it as like a river of mental moments. They use the term mental continuum. So if Rob wants to do a little meditation, he could track himself back. You could track back your body to yesterday in an unbroken chain of moments, couldn't you? This moment of body comes from the moment before, and that moment of body comes from the moment before. You can see that, can't you? And you could track your body right back to the egg and sperm of your mum and dad. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
So the same with your mind. Your mind is this river of mental moments. Your love, your compassion, your kindness, your generosity, all these different states of mind. They're the components of your mind. So your mind is like this river of mental moments, this mental continuum. And if you tracked it back as yesterday's mind and the day before and the day before and the day before, and before you know it, you'd get right back to the first second of conception. You agree so far?
Gotcha.
Right, so the second before conception, the egg was in mummy's body and the sperm was in daddy's body, wasn't it?
Yes.
Now, if you're a materialist, that's all you are. If you're a Christian, at that moment, God sticks the soul there. Do you understand me?
Yes.
For the Jews, God didn't come along and stick the soul there till a few months later. That's why they say abortion is okay for the first few months. That's the Jewish view. But that's the Christian view. And then the Buddha's view is the second before conception, your body, your egg was there, your sperm was there, but your consciousness at a very subtle level, obviously, that came from a moment of its own entity. And that is a river of mental moments that's tracked back a few weeks. And before that, it was in a previous body. And before that, it was in a previous body. And before that, it was in a previous body. So it's your mind, your consciousness that goes from life to life. And everything you do every second, which is the law of karma, every millisecond of what you think and do and say basically programs you, Rob. So you at the moment are the fruit of your past programming. A few weeks before your egg and your mind found its way to your mum and dad's egg and sperm when they hopped into bed, your consciousness was in a previous body. You went through the death process, and at the time of death, and they go to this in great detail, one of your particularly virtuous karmic seeds of non-killing, because everything you think and do and say sows seeds in your mind, it gets stored in your mind. That's how they say. One of your virtuous karmic seeds of non-killing was triggered before you even stopped breathing in the past life. That already programmed you to go to your present mother's human womb a few weeks later when she hopped into bed with your dad or wherever she hopped. And then then you died eventually. The mind left the body, and then mum and dad hop into bed and you go running, programmed by your karma with them, and you jump in and you become Rob. And so it goes like that, life after life after life. Roughly speaking, like that. What do you think?
Understand, yes.
That's the theory, roughly like that. And we are the boss, Rob. No one's up there bloody running the show. No one's punishing. No one's rewarding. We create ourselves, which is why the energy of wanting to practice a virtuous life is for one's own benefit, because we want a happy future life. You understand me? You want a happy, nice environment. You want a future environment. You know, back to the other woman, if we all practice virtue, we would guarantee the world would change. The world, physical world would change. That's the most powerful way to get a nice environment. Do you see my point? The other person who was asking me the question, the woman. Good, darling. That's the best one, plus everything else. Absolutely. So you understanding me, Rob? That's the idea. That's roughly like.
Yeah.
Clearer?
Thank you. Yeah, very clear.
Good, darling. I mean, all I know is when I first heard the teachings on karma, that I felt in my life I'd been missing that. I think the view of karma for me is about the most reasonable, kind of coherent view I've heard so far. And I don't say I believe it. I say I'm taking it as my working hypothesis. I'm trying to take it seriously. I try to learn it and I try to live according to it. I try to put my money where my mouth is, you know. That's the point about it. It's not just believe in it. It's a very active type of dynamic approach to life. We create our own reality. So ethics is the basis of this. And so the compulsion, the wish to practice ethics isn't because someone said, it's because you want to create a happy person. So any happiness you have in this life, Rob, is the fruit of your past virtue. And any suffering you have is the fruit of past non-virtue. So just that alone, it's like our life is like our garden. So we want a nice garden, please. So we better pull out the weeds and grow the flowers. Then we'll guarantee to get a decent garden in the future. It's like that. We're in charge. We're the boss. That's the part I like about it best. You understand? Okay, people. What else? A few more minutes to go. Ask me some more questions.
Hi, Robina. This
Yep.
is Anthony.
Good. Talk to me.
I've understood that the root of our negative afflictions, our negative emotions, is the self, or the illusion of having a permanent self.
No, not the self, but the ignorance, the marigpa that believes in the intrinsic, permanent, unchanging, definite, solid self. That's the cause of suffering, not the self itself. The misconception about the type of self that Buddha says is a mistake. That's the problem. They call it marigpa. In Tibetan, it's ignorance. And it's a primordially deep ignorance about the very nature of how things exist. It's the most subtle of all the afflictions. And it's a misconception that causes us to believe there's a real, solid, definite, unchanging me in there that kind of runs the show. So there isn't, Buddha says. But there's still a me. But that's where we have to understand and get the two truths together, the conventional and the ultimate together. That's the tricky part.
Okay, so it's ignorance of the nature of the
What,
self.
darling? Say it more clearly. I can't hear so well.
Ignorance of the nature of self.
Sorry, what?
Ignorance of self. Ignorance of the nature of self.
Go on. That's right. That's correct.
Yeah. Sometimes called ego in Buddhism.
Well, I mean, no, it's a very loose term, actually, because, I mean, all it is just Freud came up with this, and it's just Greek for I, isn't it? But I think in a very vague way in the West, we tend to think, oh, she's got a big ego, meaning she's a big, loud, bossy person, you know? But, I mean, really strictly speaking, it's how we talk in the West. The Buddhists don't talk like that.
Okay.
We can say it loosely. But, I mean, having, you know, any of the afflictions, I like to call them the voice of ego, the very sense of an I, this solid, concrete I, which is neurotic in its nature. It's not happy I, it's an unhappy I. It's a very restricted, miserable, fear-based I, and it's always hungry, so that's attachment. And then it gets upset when it doesn't get what it wants, and that's anger. They're all the voices of I. They're like the voices of ego. But, you know, depression and anxiety and low self-esteem are also the voices of ego. They're all the voices of this neurotic I, you know. It's a way of saying it loosely. Do you understand me?
Yeah. Do you have any tips for getting out of our own way?
Getting out of what?
Our own way. Yeah.
I know, darling. It's a good way. It's a really good way to say it. It's a very nice phrase, actually. You know, it's just practicing knowing your mind and noticing attachment arise and and noticing really, I mean, the cruel way to put it is, as Lama Yeshe used to joke to all us hippies, he says, he called ego the self-pity me. And it's very true. We can see when we're really caught up in depression, it's not criticizing us because it's very painful. These afflictions are the cause of our suffering. We shouldn't be feeling guilty. But when we're caught up in them, we are completely involved in ourselves. We can't see past our own nose. So the way to get out of your own way is to be conscious of your mind and try not to follow attachment and do your best to move forward and not grasp at things every second. I mean, it's Buddhist practice, basically, in the particular way we're talking. I mean, what else can I say? And try to also practice the virtues. Try to be patient, try to be kind, try to be forgiving. So we've got to, on the one hand, try to lessen the neuroses, but also grow the virtues as both, Do you understand my point?
Yeah, that's great. So an ongoing project.
Honey, we are a work in progress, and we have to know that second by second by second. But the irony of ego is we get stuck and we think, this is me. I am this kind of person. I am angry. I am depressed. I am intelligent. We're very concrete. And that's the self that Buddha says does not exist. It's not a concrete self. There is a self. We do have anger. We do have kindness, but we over-exaggerate their status, So it's to loosen the grip a little bit of the way we label ourselves is a really powerful way to put it, and have some confidence in our potential. I mean, I think we have to say that. It's so important to know that, and then to be delighting in our own good qualities. We never do that, We must rejoice in our own good qualities. It's like we need more humility with ourselves. We're so brutal with ourselves, Do you understand me?
Yes, thank you.
Give yourself a break, in other words, You understand?
Thanks, I do.
All right, darling. So maybe that's a little upbeat note to finish on. I don't know. Will that do? Will that do? So rejoice in our good qualities. And the point is, when we see our good qualities, when we see our potential, then we can afford to see the shit. But if we can't see our good qualities, it's too painful to see the shit. Do you understand my point? We'll just break our own backs, We've got to have a perspective. We've got to see our virtue and bring out our virtues. I always think of all my roommates, and it's the crazy roommates, all the delusions, they run the show. And the good roommates are kind of hiding under the mattress and hiding in the wardrobe. Bring them out. Bring out the virtuous roommates. I'm okay, Robina. I'm doing good enough. She's doing okay. It's fine. We've got to be a little bit kind to ourselves, but we forget, So important, I can't tell you. So we've done this a little bit time together. So happy. Thank you for having me back. And I look forward to seeing you again. Did we say I'd come when I'm there or not? We didn't, or did we? I can't remember. I don't think it was going to be too difficult, I think. I think the timing was too difficult. I think, Chiaki. Yeah. But Zoom is good. I like Zoom, I find Zoom very helpful when you have conversations.
Remember.
What?
As long as you remember, yes.
Oh, don't be mean. It's up to you to remind me. If I were in Milton, you wouldn't just sit there twiddling your thumbs waiting for me to find my way to the centre. You'd come and get me, wouldn't you? So do that. So do the same here. Come and get me. That's appropriate. And I think I find Zoom very, very personal. Quite frankly, I like it. I mean, even as Dalai Lama, I don't know if some of your lamas, but they even give us permission to have initiations on Zoom now. So I think if we have faith, it's possible, It's just the way the world is. We shouldn't be negative about it. It's the way the world is. We use bodhisattvas use whatever advantages there are, and they make the most of it, okay? Jangchub semchog rinpoche ma kie panam ke guchig kie panyam pa me pa yang gong ne gondu pa ba shog. And may His Holiness Sakya Trinzen last a long, long time, live many, many more years. Like His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, he will live another 20. So maybe Sakya Trinzen live another 20 as well. I love that Lama. He's one of I always love him too because he remembers people's names. He always says, hello, Robina. So of course I love him. He knows my name, So sweet.
Thanks so much, Robina. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, darlings, everyone. Keep moving, never give up, and keep working on the physical environment, but live in your vows. It's the best way to get the best environment in the future. Okay? Goodbye, people. Thank you, darlings. Bye.